do like a countdown. Oh, and now we're live. Hello, everyone.
But I don't feel any different.
Yeah, so first of all, starting off by saying thank you, Chase, for being here. It's always great to have people.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't think we need to do anything too fancy. Let's get into some questions.
Right on. Let me look at the chat.
Yes, I can send you a link to a pop-out of the chat if you want. So in the Hangouts chats, you should get the second link. We'll just have a pop-out of the chat alone. You see that? You might have to click on the first icon on the left side of your screen, which is a chat button. I'll pop out a thing on the right. Oh, that was the wrong button. All right, so technical difficulties. Yeah, so let me stall for a second while Chase joins again. Yes, so let's see. So we got a bunch of questions off of the Instagram post I made. So that'll be probably the best place to start. I'm going to check the subreddit real quick to see if there are any questions there. Though usually that's less of a vector for that. Yes. Yep, no questions on Reddit. So yeah, let's see. I guess if I were smart, I'd compile questions now and then have them for later. So let's do that. Let's break out the notepad. All right, cool. We're back.
There we are. Hopefully, right. Hopefully it won't drop out again. I heard you say that maybe I clicked the wrong button. I had the actual YouTube open, so your voice started going nuts for a second.
Oh yeah.
And then the internet dropped off again. So hopefully it won't drop off anymore.
Yeah, maybe it panicked because you're trying to do two things at the same time. I don't know.
I can't handle the pressure.
All right, cool. So we're back in business. So yeah, I was just saying that I was just looking at the Reddit. No questions there particularly, but that's fine. So yeah, let's start with some stuff on Instagram. So the main question that I've seen actually multiple times is, why are squids called squids?
I think I wish I had a better answer. I've tried to dream up answers because, well, or here goes. For that question to be asked, more or less, is a huge part of the reason why I call them squids, is so that question would be worth asking. That's a huge value.
Sneaky.
In calling them squids. But mainly my mindset at the time was they just weren't trainers. The
right.
last thing in the world they were trainers. So I think naming it something kind of a bit random like that kind of urged people to think that they had no idea what it was, and they don't. If you've never held squids, you really don't know what squids feel like. So, and then additionally, squids had the beach vibe that I wanted at the time, and kind of like I thought the imagery that it created was nice. Also, the main reason, there's a cartoon that I used to watch called Rocket Power.
Yep, that's.
I don't know if Rocket Power is it's about these young kids who grew up rollerblading and skateboarding and surfing in their beach town and all this kind of stuff. And there's a new kid that moves to their block. He's a bit of a nerd, and he's the new kid that moves into their cul-de-sac. And their nickname for the newest person to their new crew is a squid. So like the new kid is called a squid, and I thought squids. I thought what I was doing was going to be the new thing on the block, a little bit lame. It was going to be seen as not being really cool at first, and it was going to have a lot of charm. So I thought the term squid fit for that reason too. So
right. All right, interesting. So I have a bit of a follow-up question. What do you tell? Would you tell people laymen that don't have any idea what even cardistry is. When you show off
What I'm
squids,
doing, what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. Or actually, how do you describe squids? Do you actually call them squids, or do you call them something else?
I do call them squids. I kind of if I'm holding them and they ask me what they are, I won't say squids immediately,
Okay.
just because that the next question becomes, why are they called squids? And suddenly I'm on a long answer of what I just had to give to you,
Right.
without talking about cardistry. So my aim is always just to stay on the topic of cardistry. So I just say that it's what I'm doing is called packet cutting, and that these things are kind of an approximation of playing cards.
Oh.
And that that these just avoid some pitfalls that playing cards have. And usually if somebody's asking me, it's because I'm out. So it makes sense, you know, I'm walking or I'm on a bus or something like that.
Yeah.
But people accept it. Honestly, people accept it so quick. It's such an easy conversation now, instead of, why are you playing with those cards? And it just looks like it looks tedious to people when you're playing with cards, because you're constantly picking them up and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's definitely an easier conversation to have.
Yeah, yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I think people. Well, one of the main appeals to me in terms of talking to laymen about cardistry is just breaking away from Magic completely. And so that's one thing that's really nice, is because there's not even the possibility of even doing Magic, except for the typical joke, which is pick a squid, any squid, and but that joke takes about 3 seconds, so it's usually not too bad. But yeah, one of the things I usually highlight is that it's, you know, less of a hassle in terms of, you know, picking them up. You can also wash them; they don't get dirty because you can wash them, and stuff like that, which is I think people accept a lot.
They do. I mean, those are easy, practical reasons to explain why you would use squids.
Yeah.
The main feature, the real reason that you use squids, is because they're fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the core of it. They make you feel like you're really good at the stuff you can already do. If you can, no, genuinely, and I tried to drive this point home at Cardistry Con, and I don't know if it really got across, but if you can do flip phone, or if you can do a revolution cut or whatever with any type of confidence or anything, you're actually remarkably skilled. You're actually really good at something. Inside of our community, not so much. Like getting through the whole sequence of flip phone isn't mind blowing to anyone. You know, if you just like scramble through it. If you do it with squids, you'll feel yourself doing it better, because the objective of keeping all the packets clean and everything coming flush at the end automatically more or less automatically happens with squids. And so you have this whole new space of playing. I mean, it's literally just because it's more fun. I remember talking to Zach a long time ago, and I told him, we were just talking, and I said, cards feel so good. They feel so great, you know, like so much fun. And he clarified and corrected me and said, being good at cards feels good. And I think that's a wonder, and it's a genuinely wonderful point, because you see people doing cardistry and you start to do it yourself, but it's literally months before you feel how good, months or years, honestly, before you feel how good a cut can feel in your hands when you do it with a real amount of confidence and precision. Yeah. And squids just get you there a lot quicker. For some people, that seems to, I guess they think of it as being lame, I suppose, and I understand that, because it's not as difficult, and I get that, but that's literally the caveat that I was trying to fill with just calling them squids.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it does feel it could be perceived rather as kind of cheating, because, well, you don't have to deal with packets being square or things like that, so it's just easier. But I think that's kind of besides the point. Also, because one thing that you said at CardistryCon is that they don't replace cards. That's not the point. There's a lot of things that squids can't do that cards can do. They don't have all the properties. They're just much better at this subset of things, you know, packet cutting, and they're less of a hassle because cards are a hassle when you're on the go.
And it's hard for some people to relate to the fact that cards are a hassle, because that's also the charm of playing cards.
Right.
Like I used cards exclusive. Obviously, you didn't have squids to use, and when I was just using cards exclusively, I didn't really think of picking up cards as being a nuisance, and I didn't think of it as being a bad thing. It was just part of it. It's just what it was or whatever. And it turns out if you can take a step to the side from that and experience cardistry without that frustration, without worrying that your hands are too sweaty or that your hands are too dirty, or you don't have to worry about handing them to somebody. It's like literally squids are just making cardistry shareable, and specifically packet cutting, because that's more or less what they're good for. But
yeah, that makes sense. So I have an interesting story. I was on the subway going to work one day, and I had my trusty squids, and I was just squidding at it. And there's this person who was sitting kind of diagonal from me, I can tell they're looking, and I mean, I know that they're looking, but I'm acting like I don't know. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, of course.
I'm sure everyone can relate to this in chat.
Yeah. You go to your good stuff and try to nail it best you can. That's a fun way of putting pressure on yourself for no reason.
Yeah, especially because half the time you're wrong about that. But in this case, I knew that.
That's right. Yeah, you look up and they have already gotten off the bus. Like,
yeah. But this particular person, was like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing there?" I'm like, I'm doing packet cutting or whatever. And then the person just walks up, and as I'm doing a cut, just picks one of the squids out of my hands and says, "Those aren't cards." It's like, yeah, that's the correct statement.
That is
which is interesting, because for some reason I had the expectation that Layman would not make the connection between squids and cards, but actually they do, and that aspect ratio is kind of really more deeply burrowed within our minds than I thought it would be, because I thought that people would just see it as 4 blocks of resin that you're just doing cool stuff with.
Right. Well, I think that kind of, Patrick points this out all the time, that cards really do have a real grip on people's minds for what they're used for.
Yeah.
If you're not playing a game, or you're not playing poker or anything, or you're not doing a magic, they'll accept magic as acceptable. But if you're not doing really those two things, they don't understand what else you could possibly. And you're right, that's so ingrained in people that just a 3 by 2.5 rectangle with some color in the middle screams playing card. It screams playing poker. It's playing shuffle. It's so it really is deeply tied into it, and I think that's a huge problem for cardistry, using playing cards. Because maybe we can get past that at some point. Maybe we can add cardistry to a list of things that people do with playing cards. To me, that's a long, hard-fought battle, and that would take up a lot of focus in order to just have that much material get into culture.
Yeah.
Like that much cardistry material get into culture to where it becomes one of those staple things. This is just a shortcut even to getting people to accept it with playing cards, because if they accept it with this, it's an easy step for them to make themselves that, oh, you could do that with regular playing cards.
Right.
And then yes, that's right. You could do that with regular playing cards. And then even more options pop up. Now you can do fans because you have more than just 4. And they genuinely create cardistry. They make it up. They have the idea in their minds for the first time of, oh, you could like move around playing cards and do the same thing. And they just create it, and there's no explanation at the point, because they literally just invented it to themselves,
Yeah, that seems to be just a lot. It's a lot easier to make that sell. And in this case in particular, what I found really surprising is like he was, oh, you're a magician, and like these are things to practice dexterity as a magician. That was a connection that person made, which was a bit surprising, because I was expecting, what I was expecting to happen was that they'd be like, oh, hey, you're just playing with blocks, and actually no, those are kind of like cards, and oh, you can do that with cards, and etc.
Right.
In that case specifically, they made directly the connection to magicians, which is kind of too bad, because I think we are making pretty significant progress in that sense. You know, cardistry being more and more popular. I run into people who have seen cardistry, and don't necessarily know that it is cardistry. Like, oh yeah, I've seen
Right.
someone somewhere do that, like on Reddit or something. And it's like, yeah, now it's we are getting somewhere.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that and we're getting somewhere as a community too. We're like, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of knowledgeable people finding form and function that's really interesting and stuff, but it does get lost on anyone who is not already doing cardistry as being practice maybe for magic.
Yeah.
At least at the best, it's practicing to do magic, because magic is one of the two things that you can do with playing cards.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and it does make that's literally how strong the tie of magic and games and playing cards have, is that just a 2.5 by 3 inch rectangle screams that. They concluded that you're a magician off of just the fact that it's a rectangle of the right size. So I think that's a genuine challenge that we have to overcome to get cardistry to be as large as we would hope that it can be.
Yep.
And I think squids are a good way of having those conversations. Maybe you disagree that squids aren't good for cardistry. Maybe like it's going the wrong direction. You might think that, but it would still stand that it's the best way to have a conversation with someone to get them to understand what you're doing with cardistry. So at the worst, squids are great for explaining what you're doing with playing cards to people.
Right. Yeah, and so
and at their best, they're changing what cardistry is. So.
Yes. Yeah. Now to slightly switch gears, not really all that much. I'd like to talk about the other aspect of squids, which is, well, kind of the benefits on a creative side, because that's something that I expected you to talk a lot more about at CardistryCon, but I think you, I don't want to say intelligently, but strategically moved away from the idea of the benefits or downsides to stimulating creativity with squids.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Do you have what are your thoughts on the subject? Because I have my own, but I'd like to see what you.
Well, I did intentionally avoid it at CardistryCon, just because that conversation goes quickly to me saying it's what people hear is it's easier to make.
Interesting.
And that's not true. It is easier to do cardistry. It's easier to do a pack cut with this because you have fewer things to hold. Like of course it's going to be easy.
Right. Yeah.
But no, it does not make you better at knowing what a good cut is and why it's good and why your thumb should be on this edge while you do this move. It doesn't help with those things. What it does do though is it gives you the chance to make bad things. You run through all the bad stuff a lot faster because you're failing a lot more. So you can make a cut with squids that feels great. Like it has that little pocket feel.
Yeah.
Everything's connected in it and it really works together, but it looks terrible. It doesn't look interesting. It doesn't look difficult. It doesn't look like anything. It's not. But you can feel it being good, right.
Yeah.
And then the next goal is to make something that looks good and feels good, and that bridge comes with squids on that second step where you already know what it's like for something to feel good. So you have that reference point of, oh, this is a good move because it feels really good, just like this already defined good move feels. Right?
Yeah.
Flip phone is a great example just because everybody knows it, but it feels great when you slap that, and you see people try to like slap the end really hard and like try to like really get that audio out of it because it's that mechanic sets up so perfectly.
Right. Yeah.
For if you start in cardistry and you're just using cards, you're not necessarily going to feel what it feels like to do something well and acquire that knowledge, which is really beneficial. It's extremely helpful to know how good it can feel and what it feels like when it feels right. And to do it with cards, you have to. You can make something bad and it still not feel good because you still can't do it because the mechanics aren't there. But the squids will bridge those two things to where, you can make something that looks not good at all, but mechanically feels really nice. And that's such a huge advantage to somebody who's, well, I'm just going to use cards because whatever good reason they invent to only use cards.
Right. Yeah, and so I think to expand a bit on that, the idea that you can just kind of go through a lot of things. Well, first of all, part of the creative process is just creating a whole bunch of stuff, and you were saying that just creating more stuff means that you can go through a bunch of bad stuff faster and get to better stuff more quickly.
Yep.
Also, there's the advantage that I've run into mostly is that I've been creating cuts that are more and more complex and difficult and weird in general, and it's a kind of thing where just having squids enables me to like cut through a lot of the pain of trying to get the cut to be remotely smooth, because once I get it smooth, I can determine whether it looks good when it's smooth.
Well, that's a great point, and that's really what I was trying to. That's a much better way of saying what I was trying to say. That you try to do something with cards. When you're making something with cards, you literally don't know if it's good until it's done, until you found the closer. And you found how your hand's going to end, and you decided it's where it's going to, all that kind of stuff. You don't know until you get it down really, really well. SpongeBall is a perfect example of that. SpongeBall was such a mess of a cut while I was making it. It went so many different directions, and it started in a place that doesn't resemble where it ended for what the whole thing looked like.
Right.
And that was because it was insanely difficult. And even after I found what I thought was like that little solve of like coming to this side of the hand and folding it out.
Right.
Even after finding that, I didn't know if there was a rhythm if there's a quality of rhythm that I could acquire, that I could accomplish to get to that moment, to really sell that moment. I had no idea because I couldn't do it. Because doing that with cards is really difficult. But I think that's really the main point. The two things for squids are cardistry, and specifically for me, packet cutting is so much fun. And I really think it's a great clarification that it's so much fun when you're good at it. Like that's the really part. That's the part that's going to grip you in for a couple of years. You're not going to stay interested or enthralled by watching cardistry for a couple of. You're not going to go years if you don't do something and feel yourself have success. Like you just need to understand you're way better than you think you are. For most people, like they see this huge gap. Listen, what you're doing is really hard. Like that's part why people are doing it, because it's intriguing to people. It's a skill that's difficult, and it's something that they can do that other people will look really silly trying, and squids just cut that out, and you just have the fun part. And for some people, it feels like, hey, you're taking away everything. Hey, that's the whole thing is that. What do you mean cardistry without cards? You can't. You're taking? For me, I'm trying to lift all this burden off of you, and I'm trying to just the fun part, just the creating part, just the doing it well part, and then adding that to cards. Because at first, squids have only been around for, I don't know, less than a year still. And even for me, squids have been around less than a year. Because I didn't have them that much longer before the first time that I sold them.
Right. What was the timeline on that? It was sometime.
I'd have to look at. December. It was like, and maybe it's like a year now, actually. Oh man, it might be a year now. I think maybe it was like October was the first one or something, because I moved from Florida to Portland at the end of December, at the very end of December, and I had done a few runs of squids by then. So yeah, it must have been. It's about a year old now.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is, I didn't know starting off where squids, and we still don't quite know where squids really fit in.
Mhm.
I knew that it was going to kind of mess everything up. I knew that it was going to come in hard for people, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to shake people up, but I didn't know if it would even help you, because originally I posted because I was trying to get away from the word trainer. And
Right.
trainer meant you're doing this as a bridge to get to cards.
Mhm.
And I didn't see it that way. I saw it as just its own medium. And so I remember posting something about like it just being a different brush. This is same medium, just a different brush. Like we're still painting here. It's just here's a much better brush for you, and that kind of thing. But now the time's passed, that's only partially true. It is its own thing, but if you want to get good at a cut with playing cards, yes, you will learn a lot about that cut by using squids first.
Yeah.
Your hands are just gonna, because they're the same size. So
it's the same movement.
So your eye-hand coordination, the spatial awareness of your hands and your fingers are going to be there. Yes, 100%. It will help. But that's something I avoided wanting to admit or to even talk about early, because then it's just like, oh, okay, so if you can't do it with cards and you're a loser and you're not that great, yeah, you can use these things, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, it's a genuine bridge if that's what you want it to be. But I think most people get squids and they feel the shape for the first time, and they realize that they're not just rectangles. Like the quality of a squid is not just is it 2.5 by 3.5? It's this way. It's like, well, how does all this interact together? What does it mean? Like to be able to do flirt in a convincing way. Requires actually attention to, like, this surface is different than the surface here, which is different than this. And people's hands are so informed that any weight, if this was off kilter, if like it wasn't quite level, if it's beveled at all, any of that is really noticeable really quick, and especially with trainers, all that's amplified. If I were to reach over and like steal 4 cards away from you, I have no doubt that you would know immediately. Not only are they gone, but there's about 4 cards gone.
Yeah,
like you can tell that,
Oh yeah, and I mean,
that sensitivity is amplified with squids because they're heavier and whatnot, and the important part about squids is not from here to here. It's this way. This is the way they're interacting together was the reason they weren't trainers.
Yes.
Everything else that people had made up until that point were just not playing cards, cut like playing cards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that great. Playing cards. The reason playing cards can be cut flush is because you can break into them because they're just paper.
Right.
Well, something like plastic, if they're cut flush, you can't
grip it.
There's nothing useful about that. You can't, and even it gets harder. So paying attention to the sides was the breakthrough with squids, and why they were successful and other trainers weren't successful or having difficulty picking up momentum.
Yeah. And
but I don't want to give too much away because
and I mean, the trainers have been picking up some steam in terms of I don't want to say popularity, but in terms of advertisements, there's a bunch of people that have been doing projects with them. So, but I wanted to highlight something to the effect of how sensitive we are to what's in our hands. Do people realize how insane we sound when they say, "Oh wait, no, I don't want to use those cards because they have a black seal on them. No, I'm all about those ones with a blue seal because they're printed in another factory before they move factories because you see they cut it in a different way and they got new machines." We sound like insane people.
You do sound like insane. Well, you sound like you might be lying. You sound like you might be reading into your craft too much.
Yes.
Right. It sounds like, well, you couldn't know that. But no, I'm telling you, if you blindfold me and put a deck of tally hos in my hand, I will know that they're not Jerry's Nuggets.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%. Because I know exactly what Jerry Nugget, I can tell with ease if that's the case. So it is a bit like, it's not quite as involved as knowing a lot about wine or something, you know, like but the point here, I'll make this point. There are people who extremely into wine. It's all they do. They drink wine all day, but they're not consuming it necessarily. They're spitting it back out because all they're trying to do is hold a deck, as many different decks of cards as they can, and take in as much information as they can. So they drink a little bit, they feel like where on the tongue is affecting and blah, blah, blah. And they can start telling you some incredible information. There's not very many people in the world that can do this, but you can give some people a bottle of wine with no, you know, like, or just a glass of wine, and they can tell you what type of grape was used and about what year and from what vineyard, from where on the planet, during what season. Like, was this a grape that was like, oh, something that happened when it was cold? Was there, all that stuff is genuine inside. So when you get to something like playing cards, if you accept that as something that people can really accomplish, well, you know, feeling the difference between playing cards isn't all that ridiculous.
Oh, so, no, absolutely.
And I know you don't think it's ridiculous, but to explain to people, yes, there is a difference between black and blue seal. Why? Well, but they were printed somewhere else, and the paper was in a different temperature, and it was treated different, and they moved factories, and they pressed it differently, or the ink changed. Yeah, it genuine. Of course, it matters. Of course. It matters.
Yeah. That was to the point that, you know, when you take that sensitivity to, you know, you're talking about papers that like are slightly more or less bendy and things like that, and you apply to, you know, for packets. Now the difference between things is macroscopic. It's really noticeable.
It's really noticeable. Absolutely. Yep. And it makes a huge difference, and that's a good thing. I mean, it makes it difficult for making them, because the goal becomes make every single one of them the exact same, because the slightest difference really makes a difference. So like manufacturing wise, it makes it difficult, but it's also really encouraging that there's a lot of stuff in here to change. And people, I remember telling people when I first started using Squids that this was going to be true, and it not quite yet, because we haven't introduced custom Squids yet, but there will be people who like a certain thickness by a 1/16 of an inch. You know what I mean? They'll like it. They want it to be half an ounce heavier. That's totally legitimate. Imagine taking a deck of cards and then stacking a bunch of coins on top of it to just get a few ounces more. It feels completely different.
Yep.
And some people will enjoy that weight. Some people won't. So eventually you're just going to be able to customize these down to the exact feel that you want. And there's things like, well, how do you want the corners? But beyond the corners, how do you want the weight to be? Do you want the weight on the corner, or do you want the weight in the center? That changes everything. And so there's just so much more to play with than, well, what color can we put on the back?
Yeah, that's kind of step
one. Suddenly you can really start changing stuff. Now, Cardamundi is doing a great job of actually exploring how you change a deck of cards, and now we have Cardistry Touch, which is the first is the first deck. I didn't even notice. So which is the first deck that really it feels the way it feels because that's how they wanted it to feel.
Yes.
Not because that's how it came out and, oh man, they're nice. That's how they wanted them to feel. When they came out of the box, they wanted them to be like that. And that's new. And that's the same problem that Squids are trying to tackle.
Yeah. And, you know, it's easy to think that it's just kind of like a marketing move that, you know, they change everything from scratch and they've been trying. But I've been talking to Dimitri like over the past year and stuff, and, you know, checking in on how they're doing. And, you know, they they really were like trying different varnishes and different stuff and thinking of things like, well, we got this varnish from some country otherwise, and it's crazy how the lengths that they're going to actually do this. So
years they've been like in 2004 and at CardistryCon in 2014.
Oh yeah, yeah.
14. There was talk of it. So
yep.
Or in 15.
Yes, 15.
When was 15, not 14. It wasn't quite in 14, but
yeah. Well,
15. They had been working on it for a long time at CardistryCon.
Right.
And they made genuine improvement. I was so impressed. It was so exciting because Dimitri's the coolest. He's the best. Dimitri was the first. Dimitri's opera was the first video that I saw that I was like, oh, it's an art form.
Yeah.
Like there's no arguing. I knew that it was intriguing and that it was interesting and stuff. But I was doing magic at the time. I didn't know that someone was having the experience of an artist by using playing cards. I had never seen that before, and that video really conveyed that. And I'm just saying his sensibilities and Ladislas as well. That they heard what people's critiques in 2015, both about the design, and people gave feedback about how they felt, and like there's all these different stocks that they had that you could try and feel. And then they come to Berlin, and it's a genuine step forward, and the design is really great. They listened. It's not a double back deck. That's not the point. It still reads. You can still see one side versus the other side. And they handle. So man. I'm super enthralled by those guys. Those guys are awesome. And what they're doing. I mean, I'm so happy that they genuinely have what is the best deck that we've made. It is like, and we don't even have to be like a fan. You don't have to even say that as being a fan. You just like, no, it it is a much better deck of cards. So when they come out of the box, they feel perfect. They feel as if you'd broken them in as well, like, right in the sweet spot. And then they start to decline, just like any deck of cards. Like, so start, maybe not decline, but like will change.
Yeah, they
how their
change
function is. But they last just as long as a normal deck of cards. And I haven't used mine too much, so maybe they even last even longer. I don't know, but the fact that you can just start with something with that high of a quality is like,
and I think
before, and that's real work that they put into that.
Yeah, one of the key aspects is that the Cartomundi is actually working with cardists, whereas some people have printed cards before. They note that whenever you're printing with the USPCC, it's a gamble. Sometimes it turned out great, sometimes it doesn't, because they're doing their own research, they're doing whatever they want, and
they're printing your cards when they can print your cards, and if they come off, if something happened to the machine and they had to adjust something by a millimeter, the tiniest little bit, well, the product's going to be different. And I wasn't really in tune with how precise a deck of cards is. Like the fact that they can make something that precise, like each one's cut the same way and same size, and it's so like in the paper, like I didn't have an intuition at all for how difficult that would be. But the fact that those cards are as cheap as they are,
and they make them as fast,
and you're making as fast, it's remarkable, man. Like,
absolutely,
The smallest things, Shane. I'm experiencing it now, making squids. Where, like, these smallest things matter. Like I have to keep this room at a certain temperature when I have squids in a certain stage of making them. This room has to be not too cold.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to be, but I do have to worry about not being too close to a window when I'm doing other steps and stuff like. There's just so much that goes into it. So even with paper, that's amplified because I'm working with plastics and that has its own challenges. But paper, you can if you keep it in the wrong room, the paper will. Think about like after you get it out and you go into humidity. Well, it can't be in a human environment. Presumably, I don't know the whole process, but these are the kinds of things that I now know matter a lot. all that paper has. So if the paper that your cards were printed with were treated any differently than the deck that you liked, it's not going to feel like that. So you're right. USPCC, it's you just throwing it up in the air, and you'll definitely get them printed, and they more or less will definitely not have any mistakes. But actually, the way they feel is
it'll be between.
So now that we get to have that, that's just the coolest thing.
It's great.
It's just the coolest thing.
They also optimize for different things because it's not in the USPCC's best interest to cater to cardists because they're making cards that are meant to be played with, right?
Right. Yeah. No, like that. I mean, that just goes back to what Patrick always says about playing cards are for Magic and they're for poker.
Yes.
And cardists, we say no, they're for cardistry too. They're for doing it. No, they're not. Not in terms of like having a conversation with someone to explain and get them to mind of, no, this is a perfectly legitimate, if not better, use for playing cards. It's such a hard. Even people who are making money off of playing cards, they don't have a clue. They sent like what they sent to Cardistry Con for as a sponsor deck, it's just so out of touch with what we're trying to do.
Yep.
That it's clear that the Magic poker thing is a really, really big challenge that we genuinely have to overcome. If it's not, my decision was to step to the side, make Squids, do something that's completely not that, and now we have this little bridge bypass to where we can get into those kinds of conversations, and people invent Magic, invent cardistry themselves when they go, "Oh, you're using Squids. Why couldn't you use playing cards?"
Yeah.
And they just invented it, and that's a huge lesson from Magic when I was more involved in the Magic world than I am now. A huge goal was to get someone in any good trick, not any good trick, but the best tricks, the most fooling tricks. They lie to themselves. People will conclude things based on information that they gave themselves.
Yeah.
Therefore, it can't be wrong. You know what I mean? They're lying. You can't catch yourself in a lie. Catching yourself in a lie is impossible. It takes somebody telling you that you're delusional right now. That's not the case. You have your beliefs because you have reason to believe them. Being able to bypass all that stuff with Squids is it's just easier. But I don't know why people maybe they don't, but some people don't like that it's easier.
Yeah,
but it's not easier to be good. It's just
it just cuts away a lot.
No, this is just what it feels like when we solve that problem. This is what it feels like when people just accept it, and that helps.
I feel like it's somewhat kind of like the XM mindset, which is that you what you're doing here is trying to do the hardest thing and do it as flawlessly as possible, etc. Whereas, I mean, cardistry has evolved from that so much. It's really not about doing the hardest thing. It's about doing the nicest thing.
Right? Yeah. No, it's about doing the thing that has. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, nice is kind of it's something that just looks pleasant. My goal when I started cardistry was no stunts. It was just cardistry. Good cardistry was not stunt oriented. But that's where I came. Like when I was in high school and middle school, all I did was find different games that involved my hands, like Mayachis and even drawing was huge to me because it was just I loved being able to tactile and see progress and stuff. So my goal, like with what ended up being NB3, like that whole time, the whole thing was not at all stunt. Nothing spread it on your arm and throw it up and catch it. None of that. Like I don't want to have that conversation. I want to have a conversation about like what you said, just something nice, something that is nice and contained, and it has its own purpose, and every packet works because every packet is necessary, and all those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
Squids now, but just to illustrate how this is still all changing, Squids stunts are totally legitimate with Squids. Because it's reasonable to think, well, let me try to throw them up and catch them.
Yeah.
Because it's not, because you don't have to have the thought of, let me try. Do I really want to try right now?
Yeah.
I'll try later. I'm sure I could. I'm sure I could do it, but I don't want to try right now. No, you get to try, and then you get to adjust, and then you can do it, or whatever it is, you know. And so I'm trying to be, or I am now, more open-minded to the value of stunts, just because the medium allows for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, because for me, cardistry was 100 is all control. The whole point was to show that you had control. In a stunt, yeah, you're kind of showing that you have control, but you're also showing.
You're showing off.
Yeah, you're showing off, and it's more obvious that way. So.
Yeah, and so actually, there's two things that come to mind with that. First of all, when I explain squids and you know that they're less of a hassle, one thing I like to do is just straight up drop them as I'm talking and be like, all right, cool. Now I only have 4 things to pick up instead of 52, and that
like, look, it's over. Every time I do that, I stand up and I look, it's already over. I'm already holding them.
Yeah,
I'm already trying again. And for some people, like I picture this caveat that pops into people's minds every time we get to this part of the conversation, because they don't see picking up cards as being that big of a deal, because it's just part of it. So to them, it's like, well, it's not that bad. I actually kind of like it, and I have a solution. I sit on my bed, so they don't go far. It's not that big. It's just being able to consistently do something is extremely valuable, and it is hard for people to see past that.
Yeah.
Until they actually hold squids, because in their minds they have no idea what squids feel like, and people still have no idea why they're having the success that they're having, because to them it's just trainers.
It's just trainers.
I think the funniest term that I've heard for what trainers are, they're just pussy packets. And that's the mindset that people have.
Yeah.
Is that's like the nature of what you're doing. It's like, no, they're interacting together in a way that's actually really great and really, really applicable to the stuff that you already do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth noting that all of the moves I've ever made and posted and shown, every single one of them can be done with squids, because the principles of design that I was working with to make Bowtie and Nimbus and Slick Rock and Saxon and all those things, the principle was that I was maintaining these packets and using them to pull your eye in certain directions and stuff. Mm-hmm. And now the squids, I still do all of the material that I was doing with cards. So if people ask me, do you use cards now? You still use cards. Well, I still have cards, and I still like holding cards, and I still have an open deck at all times. But in terms of like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to play, I have no reason really to use cards, because all the stuff that I do that's fun for me, like those moves like Nimbus and Bowtie and Saxon and all those things, are better with squids. Like they're perfectly acceptable to do with squids, because it fits that. Like to do it with cards is just to, I guess, make it more difficult, but for me it's not any more difficult, because I pretty much have those moves down with cards at this point, so it doesn't add anything. The only reason that I would pick up cards is to do springs and fans, and as far as creating, if I make something with cards, there's gonna be a single card that splits off at some point, which is a rule that I vehemently had. I was just like, listen, that single card looks It's stupid. I don't like it. It's flimsy. Keep packets. You want weight. You know what I mean? You want to have some girth to what you're doing. And so single cards were just an excuse. You know, this stuff. Like getting to this position. Like stop. Yeah. Don't do this. You got to stop. You know what I mean? That was the mindset. Now that I have these, why wouldn't you split one card off? Why wouldn't you do a fan or a spread or something in the middle of a cut? Because you can with cards.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
But has that been your experience too?
Yeah, I mean,
like where do they fit in for you? Because like I was saying, we're just now learning. People are just now having squids long enough to really figure out where they're going to fit in for them for the rest of the time that they're doing cardistry. Are you finding that? Because I find picking up a deck of cards feels so goofy and wonderful after using squids. Like it's like, oh, what is this thing? Like what is this? You know,
jiggles and stuff. It's
yeah.
So it's interesting. So I didn't buy squids until I got to Cardistry for main reason because it's objectively it's kind of expensive compared to cards and whatever. And I'm not the type to spend a lot of money on anything really at all ever. So
same here. I completely understand. It's not. Squids are the price that they are because they couldn't be anything. There's not another way for them to be. None of this works. We don't continue to make progress, and we don't explore this space if they're not at the moment fairly expensive. I will say to the end of time though that they're not really expensive.
No, they're not.
Of what you get in terms of what, like, it is hard to imagine because you when I say you don't have to drop cards anymore, you go, I don't really care if I drop cards. Why? That's not a good selling point. No, I'm not going to give. I promise you, it's a genuine step. That's a genuine thing to look for.
Yeah, actually, something comes to mind about that. I have an electric toothbrush. It sounds unrelated, but it is. And so my roommates saw that I had an electric toothbrush, and I was like, "Oh man, it seems like I might want to get one of those because it's probably faster. It's better, so you can brush your teeth less long. So maybe save like 2 minutes a day, given how many times I brush my teeth a day. Okay, cool. So that's how many times. That's how many times a week, a month, a year. All right. So in the end, that's a couple hours that I could have on my deathbed, and if I could have that back, then of course I would pay like $50 or whatever. And
squids make you at least twice as productive. And to be twice as productive means you'll make it twice as far. And like from now until when you stop doing cardistry, or from now until you die, however long you're planning on doing cardistry, you're going to make it at least twice as far. Just by introducing a simple tool,
definitely. So I didn't buy squids for a while because I wasn't sure that I didn't want to just pay all that money up front. Basically, it's a psychological thing. But there's that. Also, I didn't know how they felt at all, so I was a bit dubious as to whether I would actually like them because I'd played around with using acrylic and wood and stuff, and none of those really worked for me because wood is like, I don't know, it's weird and etc. So then Cardistry came around. I was like, okay, well, this is a good opportunity to try them out, and so I tried them out. And after about 10 seconds, like, okay, cool, I'm going to buy these now. Chase, are you there? Or are you? It looks like Chase is. Yes, Chase. Chase was having problems with his router, so I'm going to guess that's what's going on. But he'll be back soon. Luckily, it's not like the other time where I'm losing connection because I can still have the stream up. So now all I have to do is stall until it comes back. So anyways, I'll keep that story in my pocket as I don't know, do things like look at chat. Sorry, chat, for we've been going on and on about squids, mostly because, well, that's what most people want to hear about. I will get on the topic of creative process. Don't you worry. I know that's an important one around here. But yeah, I think part of the meta reason that we're talking about squids on such a high level is because I think it answers a lot of questions that people will have, such as why are there four? It's on my now I have a window up that has a bunch of questions that I see that are interesting, and I'm getting better. For those who've been here for a while, they'll remember that I said something along the lines of I have no clue what I'm doing. Now I have some clue, not a lot, but still I'm improving. I like to think. Also, now you can see me. I know that's been an issue before, so here we are. Let's see. So yeah, people have been pretty active on chat. That's pretty good. We have a couple of viewers in here. I'm glad about that. Usually more the merrier, so that's always fun. Let's see. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, still stalling over here. Just keeping you informed that I'm in fact in the process of stalling. Let's see. Now, if I can gauge the feeling on chat, it seems like basically people, and that's through rough skimming because you guys been pretty active. Yeah, people seem to think that it's expensive, and I can definitely relate to that. Obviously, as I just said, I think when I was making that decision, it was a bit different because I didn't have all of that theory behind what squids were and what they meant, etc. So now I think you have more of a reason. Also, a lot of people have bought squids. Now you have credibility from all of the cardists that use squids and etc. So there's that. And as Chase said, it is expensive, but also you have to keep in mind that squids don't go bad at all, like ever. You can wash your squids. I just washed my squids this morning because I dropped them in something that resembled kind of mud. Yeah, you can just do that. You can't wash your cards, at least not without destroying them, I guess. So that's also a thing to consider. I'll use these squids forever. I might buy some in the future. I also don't have to. So it's a one-time investment. The worst thing that could possibly happen is you losing some. And I mean, nothing you can do about that. Just get better and don't lose things. I just have these in my pockets. See, instead of having a really thick wallet that I never use anything in, I just have my thinner version of my wallet on top of 4 squids. Let's see. Yep. It looks like Chase's internet died out, so he'll be back as soon as he can. Someone is asking me specifically if I'm from Montreal. No, I am not from Montreal. I used to go there on a regular basis because my now ex-girlfriend lived there. Now I don't go there because of the ex part. So, so that's a thing to keep in mind. But yes, so I've hung out with the Montreal crew. Shout out to the Montreal crew, bunch of good people. Now I'm originally from France, and now I live in the Boston area. So yeah, good old East Coast. Yes, Kay is wondering if this will end like the Daniel and Zui stream. No, I really hope it doesn't. It really shouldn't. I'm doing all the right things on my side. In terms of, I'm plugged into the Ethernet, using the right browser. It's been working for so long, so it'd be weird if it broke. In the future, though, I'll have a better camera because I got a new computer which can handle more things. Except I don't have the cable for the camera, which is pretty dumb. But hopefully that video quality will be a bit better in the future. So hey. That's always nice. People are asking why no accent from French, from Frenchness, from being French. My mother was American. Well, is still American actually. So my mother's American, so I grew up speaking English to her. My father is French, so I also grew up speaking French, and I grew up between mostly France, but also spent some part of high school in the U.S. And it's a long story. It's complicated. It's not that interesting. But long story short, I've been speaking English. Ooh, Boston fan. We should have a Boston meetup. That'd be pretty good. I don't know when I'll be able to do that because I've had a brutal time over the past month. It's only been a month. It feels like it's been at least 3 months, but that is not the case. Chase is back online. I think he'll be back any second now. But yeah, I'll if you're interested in having a Boston meetup, then you know, the Cardistry subreddit is a great place for that to happen because, you know, you just get to reach a bunch of people. And yeah, so if you're not on Cardistry subreddit, you know, it's not always the greatest content. It's just usually a bunch of people will put up whatever they can. And it's never bad content. It's not like you're ever feeling bad for having gone on subreddit. But at the very least, you know, you get to reach a bunch of people that you wouldn't reach through Instagram because the spread of information works in a very different way. So that's a thought. Leo's asking if I'll ever come to an East Coast jam. If I can, I would love to. It's just I'm really busy. I actually don't have time to do these streams anymore, but here I am doing them because I love you guys. So yeah. So in terms of East Coast jam, I'll figure it out. I mean, all that's doing is cutting out of my sleep schedule, and who really needs sleep? No, come on. So yes, San Francisco. However, that's a bit further. I might have a bit of a hard time getting there. LA. Well, I think yes, I'll definitely be in LA for CardistryCon. They haven't decided on the or at least announced. I don't know if they have decided at all on the I haven't decided. They haven't decided whether when it's going to be or announced it. I think. I mean, they're gonna pick a time where most people don't have school, so probably the summer. That would be my good guess. Yes. So Chase is indeed dealing with his router. So so yes, he'll be back anytime soon. All right. So Cole Blackman is saying, man, there should really be a social media site made for Cardistry community specifically. Well, if you haven't heard, there is Cardistry.io, which is just that. It's a work in progress, but it is meant to be a website for Cardistry only, and it's optimized for that, and it's so far pretty good. I used it on and off. Right now it's in beta, so obviously there's not as much stuff. It'll only really work if people actually use it. So, and Chase is getting back in the call. So we can end the stalling. Hey, what's up?
What are you worrying about, man? Don't worry, I'm coming back.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, so I just got tired. You just kept talking, and I was like, how am I going to get out of this conversation?
Cool. So, where were we? I was just talking to Chad about random stuff. So,
where is the? Let me see what everybody's saying.
People are talking right now. I was doing a bit of interacting with the chat. But yeah, so we're talking slightly about CardistryCon 2017, Cardistry.io, East Coast jams, things like that. But yes, actually, I was talking about my experience with Squids. I don't know how much of that you heard. So
just about none of it. Tell me all the good things that you said.
Okay, cool. I'll just start from scratch then. Yeah, so right, we were talking about how it was a bit scary to invest, you know, whatever amount of money that was at the time, and so I was worried. And so until CardistryCon came around and I could actually feel them in my hand, it took me about 10 seconds before realizing, yeah, that's definitely worth it. This this is actually exactly what I wanted to feel. It doesn't cut into my fingers, but it's still plasticky enough that it doesn't have like weird rugged edges or things like that. And I mean, it's just not going to break. I mean, it's not hot enough for them to bend, but they're
the material itself is another huge reason why squids are having the success that they are.
yeah.
That it actually feels weird. You don't understand what this type of plastic feels like, because we do stuff to the plastic before we actually pour it. We're doing something that we have found to be really beneficial in terms of how soft the plastic can be while still being really rigid. Like you almost think you can squeeze it, and like maybe you'd be able to, and maybe you could, if you tried hard enough. But yeah, the plastic's important. Keep.
Yeah. So yeah, it was once I got an actual hold of them, I decided to buy them, and it was a pretty easy decision from that point on. But and from now, the place they take in my life, which is the original question you asked, is that I was instead of having my really thick wallet that I don't use 90% of, I just have a slimmed down version of my wallet, which just has my student ID and money and stuff, and I just have these on top. So I still have the same shape in my pocket, except that now I have squids in my pocket.
That's another really great thing about. Well, even cards have this, but the fact that you have to put it in a box and putting them in your pocket, it's like I'm putting them in a microwave. Like they're going to warp if they stay in your pocket.
Yeah.
Squids, they're perfect.
Yeah.
It's what you're used to. It's what you're used to putting in your pocket. Like to put something in your pocket, rectangle that like all fits in perfectly. It is a nice accident that it's extremely inconvenient to travel with.
Yeah. And one of the nice things that happens with the squids, I don't know if this happens with all squids, but when I have them in my pocket, they kind of compress, and so they stick together. So there'll be like a block where I can just move the top.
Yeah, exactly. But then you can get in and you can.
Yeah,
and that's really and then go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the little.
And that's something that we've finally gotten to with squids, that they consistently do that. There's squids that people have gotten that were really sticky, but they were sticky for a reason that we have no idea why they're sticky, because they weren't sticky when they left us. It turns out that plastics, what we're doing because of the mix that we created for squids, it can continue to change days after they're done. Right. So they get packed and I'm trying to get them out as fast as I can. So I would finish them. It would all be done. I'd play with them, make sure they feel great, cool, package them up and ship them. And by the time they'd get to somebody, the stuff had changed about them and they became really sticky and stuff. And we were talking before about like the climate mattering, how much that actually matters for playing cards. Same is true for squids. So now once squids are done, we keep them for a couple of days. I'll hold them, make sure they feel great, leave them for a couple of days, and then ship them. Or not a couple of, maybe just like a day and a half to be sure that nothing's going to change about it. But now we've found just about the mix that we really want of they will stick together and turn, like you can push them together and get them to be one block. And then just say, because it's so convenient for traveling, because some people love the sticky part, and other people hated it. So I think we found, but each have benefits. So I think we've just recently, and kind of starting with Pat's Primes, really struck that balance of really what do we want in terms of how sticky and slick they are, because you want, while you're using them, no stick. But there is convenience for having stick for travel and stuff. So we've struck that balance really well with Pat's Primes, and Pop-Tarts are going to be the same way. We're super happy about that. So I'm glad that that was noticeable to you. Yeah.
So and to expand a bit on the way I use them, it's just what I use when I'm walking around. If I'm like, well, just walking around. If like I was on a walk last night, and I just had them out and dropped them in mud. Not a big deal. I can kind of wipe them off and also wash them, which is a thing you just can't do with cards. Or rather, you can wash them, except that you can't use them anymore ever. And so, yeah, but it's in terms of if I'm sitting down in my room, I'm gonna orbit more towards cards, and I'll use. So this is a nice segue because I do want to talk about your creative process and stuff. So, the way Squids work for me is that I'll try to come up with something with cards, and as soon as I have like a roadblock, a technical roadblock, or something like that, is when I'll break out the Squids. But one of the nice things that cards have that Squids don't have is that you have the ability of always splitting off the packet whenever you want. The problem with Squids is that you have to make that decision earlier on in the cut. Whereas if you're in like this position, then if you're in this position, then you can only take a card from here, right? And I'm going to do a Sibylle thing, but that's taking away the idea that maybe you're starting from here and you're going to break off this packet like that. So that is one of the limitations that's in terms of creativity, at least. But there are other things where it can be useful to restrict yourself to having a certain number of packets. So
that's right.
The point being that it's really there for diversity, just having different things to play around with, and it also allows me to play with when I'm refining a cut. One thing that I've consciously decided to do is work on releasing the pressure on the cards, because when you're learning a new cut, it's very easy to just have like all of this pressure built up because you're trying not to let anything fall.
You're just trying to get through the cut. You're trying to see what it looks like. You're trying to know what it is that you're trying to make. So you overcorrect that way. And so, you're saying, or go keep going.
Yeah. So the thing is that because of Squids, you don't have to deal with cards falling off or coming out of squareness and stuff. I can just practice having a exceedingly light touch and getting all the movements down, and then I can kind of correct when I'm using cards to have the lighter touch, not that light because it doesn't work, but having somewhat a balance between having the really just way too crispy.
You're just genuinely gaining information about the cut. You're acquiring really useful knowledge about what you're trying to do, to where it's totally applicable to transfer to cards. And you said that you get limited because you can't once you split, if you say you have 4, like you're saying, if you split 2 up here where you can't split this one, this is where you have to go. You have to go here. Same thing, you have to go here.
Yep.
And part of that might feel limiting, but it's only limiting if you're starting a cut, if you're starting your design from a grip that you're starting with.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the only time that's really an issue. If you have the heart of what you want, then it becomes, I can add a 4th one, or I can add a 5th one, and this spot or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think this point may not land all that well for some people, but I think for some people this really drives through your intuitions. There's an infinite number of ways that you can arrange 52 pieces of paper.
Yep.
Right. So that means there are an infinite number of cuts to be found.
Yep.
There's not a stop, and that's easy for your intuitions to settle on. That 52. You can. There's any that you could do an unlimited amount of arrangements.
Yep.
But that's true, and it has nothing to do with the fact that there's 52 of them. If there was 50 of them, right, or 52 or 51 of them, like the Cardistry Touch has 51, right?
Yep. 53, I think.
53. They added one. Okay.
Yeah.
It went up.
Yeah.
So you can do the bevel and stuff. Pharaohs. Then nothing changes. There's nothing special about 52. So 51, there's an infinite number of arrangements. 50, there's an infinite number of arrangements. And that continues all the way down to 4. And just because you're using 4 things does not mean that there's not an infinite number of arrangements to be had.
Yep.
To make a cut. So the intuition of there's more to be done and you're limiting when you go down to 4 just is clearly not true, because there's an infinite number of ways of arranging 4, as there are infinite numbers, because we're dealing with infinity here. We're not dealing with a number. This is just, you can do all of it. You know, you can start from anywhere and go anywhere, and in any direction. And you're never going to hit a stopping point. You're never going to hit a bridge that you can't cross.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we want to bring in the math speak, I would say that's probably an LF1 situation, but don't worry about that.
I was saying the same thing. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay, good.
I was spelling it in my head even.
So that's a good point. I want to do the math thing and think, okay, so at what point do you not have an infinite number of possibilities? Well, I think obviously when you have one packet, well, technically you do, but that's cheating, right?
Well, but it's not. There, because you're not just working with a picture. You're not saying how many different ways can I put it here. You're talking about this is a performance art. What we're doing uses time. It is part of the medium. What we're doing is we're starting somewhere and then we're getting to another point. It would be like saying there aren't an infinite number of flip tricks to do skateboarding because you only have one skateboard. It's not the skateboard that you're manipulating. You're manipulating through time. So you can have a card that starts here and then it moves to here and then moves over here and then moves over here. You know, here's a perfect example of isolation. The medium, it gives way to anything. And that's what's so wonderful about performance arts. And ours gets to be something that you can really render one idea, but it takes time to show that idea. So for and all this talk, for some people, it's not helping at all cut through those intuitions. But if it does, I mean, that's a really useful way of thinking about it. That no, squids do not limit you in any way. And saying, but you can't split off anywhere. Okay, well, you're taking away one option for how you could what you could do next. But infinity minus one option is still infinity. Like that's the way this game works.
Right.
There's an infinite number of things. So like the intuitions get really, really difficult, but it's a really important thing to understand. If squids seem odd to you, maybe that's I mean, that are not useful, or like you're taking away too much. You're not. And we get to say that with confidence, just because mathematically they're wrong.
That's a fair point. I think you could make the counter argument that, when you're trying to find a flourish, you're trying to find an optimal kind of direction. So that option is it can be significant, and this is why I still use cards for that specifically, is because it might be that the best flourish I can make out of this position involves doing this. Right. It could be. Now it's a bit tricky, because whether or not you can really order flourishes is difficult, and it gets really complicated.
The whole infinity thing pops up every single time. That's why it's a really useful thing to get your head to kind of sit with the fact that is true. That you're not actually limited in any way by just using 4 things. You can make things with cards that you can't make with squids, and you can do things with squids or cards that you can't do with the other.
Which is why they're complementary.
It's just but it just drives back to the fact that infinity minus whatever, infinity minus all the single card flourishes is still infinity. And that's a difficult thing to sit with. But if you can, if none of these words have worked for you so far, maybe they won't at all. But if if that is helpful, if you can get to that intuition, you'll find that there's less squids are less problematic for your options of creating than you might think.
Yeah, and
that
I
becomes
mean,
obvious to people. And like you said, in the first 10 minutes, you totally understand. Like, oh, okay, that's right. If this is what
yeah,
my skill feels like when I do it well, and then you become more familiar with your strengths and weaknesses, and you start to move forward. And suddenly, having fun is reasonable, and not you don't have to torture yourself.
Yeah. Right. So, switching gears a bit, a lot of people have been asking about your creative process, and it's a thing that pops up on the live stream a lot. So, as a bad question, I'll say, can you just kind of talk about that, or do you have specific thoughts about your creative process specifically, rather than?
It is one of the questions that's hard to answer because it's not a great question, like you were just saying. Like it's not, it doesn't give you much to go forward on.
Yeah. Well, if you want me to,
I can there, because there's a few different things in that. There's
right.
What are the things what are the decisions that you tend to have to make? If you ask me, what are the decisions that you tend to have to make during the course of making a cut?
Right.
You know what I mean? And keep in mind that I have less than 15 examples of this. Like I've only gone through it a few times. There's really only 8 or 9 flourishes that I'm really proud of, that are like really done in a way that like I could answer each question for how it was made. But the general process, generally, it starts with finding a mechanic that works, right? So it could be like just as simple as like, okay, I want to, like, I can thumb this off.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, now I have that. All right, cool, sweet. All right, and then say I like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, now I can do that. Let me start adding some structure to it. Okay, well, there's a sequence. Right, I'll just add in a one-handed cut. Okay, boom, never done that before in my life. But there's something that now you can start with, and now I can start to choose things that I like and that I don't like about that.
Right. Yeah. So to kind of summarize in a reductive kind of way, it seems like you're throwing a bunch of stuff together until you get something that resembles a sequence, and then kind of choosing paths in every direction from there. Right. You kind of have like a decision tree that you can make at every part of the cut. Maybe the opener is not actually what you want to because you found something more interesting later, and so you can always branch off of everything, and you kind of throw a bunch of stuff together.
That does, because finishing. Okay, this might be a good place to start. Finishing a cut, feeling like it's done, is throwing away most of what you did, right? Most of like there are cuts that I could call a cut just because it has a beginning, middle, and end. Like it does something, and I can repeat it, so it's a cut. That I don't do anymore, that I don't even consider to be that I don't even think about as being useful at all, because there's something in there that I used and made something else with. So yeah, maybe good to show examples. Like, is there one that would be best to go over, do you think? Here, I'll just here. So I used to do this. This, that, like that. So I would go. I stole this was stolen from Alejandro. This little thing, he went like this.
Yeah.
So I took that and I went like this. And this and did all this. Okay. So the only real interesting thing in there for me was this. Was rocking up like this.
Yeah.
Like I love this mechanic of going on the thumb.
Yep.
Like this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I want to do something from there or whatever. So eventually I did this. So I did, all right, I want to go in a different direction than what I had been doing. So I rock up here, and then I can take this one, and then I was like, oh, my thumb's right here. I'll take this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Oh, there you go. That's funky. That's different or whatever.
Yeah.
So then now I can. Who knows? But there's the grip, right? So it started with just liking this thing, but now I found something more substantial because it led to this. Now, if I just to show you where this goes, this is SpongeBall.
Yeah.
This is what SpongeBall started off with. It was this. It was just this is what I was interested in. And I thought that the sequence would go like this, and then I'd roll into something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That ended up becoming, instead of rolling up here and then taking this grip, now I've removed one, and I'm here. I realized that I could push this down.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's weird. Now I got, all right. Now I'm even more uncomfortable, so that's probably a good thing. And eventually this became where I could take this and I could turn it vertical like that. So the whole thing was this to this to that. That was the whole, that was it, right?
Yeah.
Not satisfied, okay, it's not, that doesn't look anything like Nimbus. That's not as good as Nimbus, so I have to keep going, right? So this becomes like, oh, I can steal this one out. Okay, there's another option, right? Eventually all this becomes dropping this, right? So I do that. This goes down here. Eventually I was like, oh, okay. Well, then I tried something else, and I got to this, to where I grounded this on my pinky.
Yep.
And I realized I could take this with my thumb. Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. You get to like this cross thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting. Maybe I can spin out of it or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes. And so now we're changing. Now we're just changing. Still has this. This goes down here. Maybe I can, this comes up here. Maybe I can. But I didn't have that. I didn't have quite that idea at the time. But the main thing is, what I'm saying is, it started with this. This was the whole point, and it led me to a nice sequence that rolled together like a whole thing. Now I'm going to drop that, and the reason I'm going to drop that is because I have a standard of a general rule. It's a whole other thing to try to explain, but the number of packets that I'm using should match the number of beats or the number of important moments that I'm going to have in the flourish. So I'm going to start dropping stuff. So I have, getting rid of this, right? Which is hard because that's what it all started with. At the time, it was difficult to get rid of. And I was like, okay, I can go like this. All right. And then I found this, like, oh no, here's something interesting, right? And then if you watch now, like, okay, now a flip phone, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can, of course, you're gonna flip phone.
Right. Yeah.
But looking at this now, now I'm oriented.
Yeah, that's possible.
So it's going. So now I have to fix that one. So I identified which one it is that is ending up the wrong way. Okay, it was the one in the middle. The one in the started. It ends in the middle. It started on top. So it was the blue one.
Yep.
So now I have to flip this blue one to keep all that structure, right?
Yep.
To keep all that structure, I now have to, if I want to flip phone at the end, I need to change the orientation of that first packet.
Yep.
Right? Now, ideally, I don't have to change too much about the form overall. So here's what it started out as, the opening, right? To get the blue one. This is originally what I did. Right, I'm just taking this, pushing it down here. Yeah. And then going through, right? When I'm just going to change it slightly. I'm just going to do this, and instead of just pushing down, I'm going to actually slide this down here. Yeah. And now do this. Yeah. Okay. Now it's the other way. Now it's the other way. Yeah.
It's a very minimal change.
Right. And now nothing changes except for the fact that when I do flip phone at the end,
it works.
It works. It's all the same way. Yeah. Now, with cards, we were talking before about how much harder it is to create with cards. With cards, I had figured out that entire sequence and had no idea if it looked good because I couldn't do it. because I couldn't.
Yeah.
The grips that are involved here are a little bit crazy. Because
A
all this
little
is
bit, just a tad.
it's one big regrip. Like
Mhm.
all this is being switched. Like that's the motion of the cut is just a regrip to get you to here.
Yeah.
And then bring that through. So then it's just decisions like, well, I don't want to actually just. I don't want Tobias to know that I stole from him that clearly, right? He can look and see what I stole, but I don't want him to know that much that I stole it. So I'll change it a little bit. I'll flip this one. I'll flip this blue one over, then go into the sequence, right?
Mhm.
And then I'll change this, and I'll instead of ending up on the thumb, I'll end
Yeah,
down
just
here,
dropping
right?
it. Yeah.
And then eventually that became a much better closer, was doing this and then bringing it up.
Oh yeah.
Because now it looks nothing like flip phone. Now there's no flip phone in it, but there's flip phone is right here. It's, if I can get to here without messing up. Oh, no. I refuse to apologize for not being able to do something first try. So this gets to here. Here's flip phone.
Yeah.
Right, there it is. But it's hidden in.
Yep, in doing that. Yeah.
So the question is, what's the creative process? It is a matter of finding something you like and finding something that you like that comes after it. And by you like, I mean something that feels interesting. It feels like it has to go somewhere because it's not closed yet. You feel like you're mixed up and you're in a precarious situation,
Mhm.
and you're gonna have to, something big's gonna have to happen for this to work.
Right.
And then it's a matter of dropping those things aside. So this thing is no longer, in terms of SpongeBall, is no longer a useful mechanic.
Yeah.
I still like this. I still like doing it. I think it feels neat. But it's not. It's not it. It's not.
Yeah.
It let go. That's gone.
Yep.
And it's not. Yeah. It's gone in a way in terms of creating this one specific cut, because I make stuff all at once. So I'll work on one cut. I don't have 3 different things going on at once. I just have one thing that I'm working on.
Yep.
And I don't know how you could. If you have multiple things to my mind, if you have multiple things that you're working on, you're just working on one. Like you're just working on one cut because it's just the number of options that you have up in the air.
Yeah.
At the time that you can sequence. So in my mind, you're always only working on one cut.
Right.
And yeah.
And
that's in general, that's what it is. It's find something that you like, find another, get a way into that thing or a way out of that thing. Something that's going to lead you towards resolution. And then it's just a matter of keeping relevancy on like, what are people watching and what moves are popular right now. And those thoughts aren't conscious thoughts, really. That's just, you are aware of what is popular and like what people will recognize and how can I disguise this as being something different. And all those kinds of questions start coming up.
Yeah. That seems to
so process. What's hard about the word process when you ask, because that's the easiest form of that question. That's the broadest form of that question. But process is misleading. Process was like, there's steps. There's not. There's not really steps. There are decisions that you have to make multiple times for different cuts. Like the same questions can come up.
Yeah.
Like, does this look too much like something else?
Yep.
That might come up and you'd have to answer that. Or can you even see the important part? Like, is my hand blocking something? Like those things come up. So those are steps that are always involved of making sure that those things are taken care of, that you can see the cut, that it doesn't look too much like something else, that that you're doing it well, all those things. They're kind of steps, but they're not.
It's not a 1, 2, 3
not
guidelines.
Yeah, there's not a guideline.
Yeah, and I mean,
but
part of the.
I mean, I assume everybody would have their own own set of questions. It's just what are the quality of the questions that you're asking yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How useful is it actually to spend time answering these questions? You know what I mean? Like if you're deciding where your thumb is gonna go, like should your thumb be on? Does it look better with your thumb on the corner or just on the edge?
Yeah.
Or should I switch this whole thing up and change it to the rail or the nose? Like sometimes those are good questions, sometimes they're not. Sometimes those things are irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's just a matter of no, like if it doesn't say if for you it doesn't sound like I've answered the question at all. Like,
no, it does.
Well, but if there's anybody who's thinking like, okay, well, I just heard you say all those words, and I have no idea how to get better. Like, I still don't have a clue what that is that you're not asking good enough questions. And the reason you're not asking good questions is because you haven't asked enough questions to be able to recognize what a good question is. And
it's a really good way to put it.
So your goal at that point is to find a way to get in contact with those questions. So it's either you ask somebody who knows more than you and they can kind of guide you to what good questions are, or to my mind more preferable, you have made so much stuff, you've asked yourself these things, or you've attempted to do this so many times that you actually start to make progress. And progress is daunting, especially if you're just using playing cards.
Yeah.
So squids become useful again.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of the reason I asked this question to Broadway is because the implicit question is, what does a creative process mean to you? Right. So for different people, it means different things. And the way you put it is that for you, it's about asking the right questions, which is, I think, a really good way to put it. But I think it's also not the same for everyone else. And I really like, having been doing these live streams, it's really interesting to see the contrast between different people's creative process, not just what the creative process is, but what it means to them to have a creative process.
Right.
Hold My Brain While I Shuffle, Dimitri's book, also outlined basically a creative process, and on a meta level, what a creative process might be. But it's only just one. Well, it has a bunch of useful ideas, and in all of these streams, there's always just useful ideas. But the way a creative process is perceived is, I think, a very personal ideal that you kind of develop just by going through your own creative process.
And that's why I was trying to be as broad as I possibly could for answering that. For like, well, what should I? Okay, I'm trying to get better at cardistry. What is it that I should be looking for?
Yeah,
I think the foundation is look for good questions. Now, we might disagree on what a good question is. Aviv is going to have a completely different idea of what is necessary and unnecessary about a cut I can't say cut because he doesn't really. Aviv does Aviv. He doesn't do. He doesn't do cuts. He's going to have different questions, but the point is he has questions, and I guarantee you he has really good questions because his answers are really good. What's coming out of him is really good. So I can guarantee, without argue, you can't argue this point. Good questions are the foundation of making progress. Mm-hmm. How can you make decisions
without asking questions?
B, without asking should it be A or B?
Right.
So and then it's just a matter of finding, well, do I want to ask should it be A or B, or should I ask should it be A and then B, or maybe I can go B and then A and then find a closer for something, or like there's a way of jumbling the stuff up. But the point is, your questions need to get better. You need to be asking questions that actually are pushing, because some questions have answers but aren't getting you anywhere, and some questions might seem to not have answers but actually be taking you on a really good trajectory.
Yeah, and you know, the idea of, you know, I think having a question which is simply just should it be A or B is definitely restrictive in how broad it is, because there's so many parameters that are involved in whether one option is better than the other. So the question should probably look more like, well, which one looks better, which one leads me into a better position, and things like that.
Right, and then Matt, because then you start using words like better, and like, is this one better? Well, those are the things that you start to determine.
Yes.
When I decide that something is better than something else, and I show it to someone, some amount of people will really like it, and presumably some people don't. Yeah, so it's just a matter of the creative process. Everyone's creative process is to answer questions that they're asking themselves. And a lot of these things you don't recognize as being questions. Because you don't think of it in terms like that. And this is a bit like the infinity thing. Your intuitions really have to glob on to these kinds of things to really get a sense of what you're doing. Now, you could be, I'm certain there are people who are not conscious of either one of those things. Right? They're not conscious of questions, but I can assure you they are asking questions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And you know, I never thought about it as explicitly asking questions, like like it's hard not to agree with that. And in fact, you can, because that's what the decision is asking a question. But it's a very interesting way to think about it, because when I come up with a cut, I like to focus on things like, you know, having a theme and kind of like a story, which I'll go into once I've figured out what that means. But those lead naturally into questions, like when I'm coming up with the cut, how does this really stick with the quote unquote story that I'm going for? And I think different cardists with different quote unquote with different cardists with different creative processes are going to be asking themselves different questions, as you said, and also different cardists are going to have different answers to those same questions.
That's right.
So,
because there's like, because you said, what was the term that you just used? That
story.
Yeah, like you're telling a story. You say story, and then I would say purpose, or not purpose. I'm trying to think of words. I'm trying to save words for other kinds of answers to not like cross stuff. But
well, to put in the way Patrick was explaining his creative processes is what I call the story is what he calls the why, and it's analogous.
That's right. Yeah, because I started to say purpose. I was like, well, the word purpose needs to be held for like explaining the thing that happens inside of a cut. Like the thing that the cut is the purpose. I like, you think of it as being a story, like from A to B. Who's live stream?
Yeah.
I'm live streaming. Can I use these? No, but I'm live streaming.
Yeah, got a bit of a intervention here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, that's right. I need them. Okay. Sorry. I stole headphones without asking them. So.
Oh.
He wasn't home. I couldn't ask. It's because of you. You asked me to do that. You asked me to do that.
I'll take the blame. Yeah. So, where were we?
Solving the world.
Yeah.
You call it telling a story. Mine is having a theme. So my thing is like everything, like if the one that I can be confident with. Saxon, right? For me, has a theme that is that's true throughout. Like it's about this structure here, right? It's about that, and then everything kind of tumbles from there. Yeah, so I think of it as being that. Patrick would disagree, though. Patrick wouldn't ask, "What's the theme?"
Yeah, no, definitely.
That's not really a relevant question for Patrick. Patrick says he doesn't need A, B, and C to be coherent together. He doesn't need them to be the same shade of red. He just needs colors. He just needs 3 different colors. So he needs something to start, a purpose, and then a way of closing that. And sometimes the purpose is at the end. Sometimes the purpose is at the beginning. You can shuffle these things. But the point is, Patrick sees cuts as being independent. You could have 3 or 4 different thoughts, important things that go into one cut. That's why Patrick's stuff is so wonky. You know, that's why it's so every moment is I didn't see that coming. My whole purpose was that by the time you get to halfway through the cut, you should really know what the closer is going to look like. It should, I want it to, you really understand where it goes, and it didn't go outside of its bounds. It stayed on top of it. It didn't lie to you. It didn't surprise. It may have surprised you overall, but it didn't surprise you through the sequence. Everything looked justified and everything. Patrick doesn't have that. Patrick doesn't have that concern at all. Patrick is just, I'm moving forward, and that's why he's able to create with such a wider girth than I can currently, because he can make something that seems like a Vive. He can make something that seems like Tobias. And he can make something that looks like maybe something I would do. He can do that. He has that range because he's not worried about theming. He's not worried about things being coherent together. He's just worried about that one thing that he's working on. So.
Yeah. And also to clarify, there's not like a necessarily a right way. This is what defines a person's style, I might say, is those little things, which is, you and I think are both looking for themes. I've been trying to think about them as stories for a bunch of reasons, which I haven't clarified. And that's different for Patrick. It's different for Shivraj. It's just different. And so I think that's really kind of what defines a style.
Different. But and for clarification, different questions are being asked.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that what constitutes a good question is changing between those people. But if you really don't have, if your best question is, well, what is your creative process? Then what that tells me is that you need to be asking better questions. Because that in itself isn't a good enough question. So find ways of doing that, and that's just time. Like, it's just going to take a while. There's not really there's not a list of questions to go look at. It's just identifying that Aviv does have different questions than I do when he's concerned about making something. I was never at any point, never. It wasn't ever going to happen. I can't show those. Patrick would be mad at me. This thing.
Oh yeah.
At no point, and never was I going to try to. It wasn't going to happen because there's nothing in there for me. But it. And that's what's great. That's why Cardistry is fun to watch it continue to evolve in so many different directions. Because now you have the Great Danes, and they're just pure Cardistry. That's just. Cardistry. It balances between packet cuts and occasionally doing these funky things, and then I have a Vive that's just pure experimentation. This is just how far apart can these ideas be? How far, like this move and this move are just completely removed from each other. For me, Saxon and Bowtie and all those things look right next to each other. They're in the same pocket.
Mhm.
That's why, yeah. So seeing Cardistry continue to have surprises pop up like Shivraj, other people had bent cards before,
Yeah.
and other people had bent cards with the intention of using it in Cardistry, but no one had done what he ended up calling card. No one had purposed that
Yes.
towards a whole thing, like a whole sphere. It's just maybe an individual idea. So,
Mhm.
yeah, man. So now we have squids. We have playing cards getting extremely good, like the ones you're holding,
Yep.
and we have card destroy, and that kind, and I guess, and isolation. So like
Yeah.
you have this really nice world of you can go choose all these things.
Yeah.
And a lot of the information is applicable, and there's a lot more to glob onto. That's great.
Yeah. So speaking of and actually, no, I'm gonna stay on the creative process thing for a second because I have a couple other questions. One of is so you kind of come back to some of those personal rules that you have. So you talked earlier that don't do things with a single card popping up, and have roughly the same number of moments as packets and things like that. Can you expand a bit on that, or?
Sure. Here's more math stuff. I'll do it in math terms for you.
I'm always down for math.
The equation would be some given number of packets. We'll just use x. So x number of packets. X number of packets equals X number of beats. We'll call them beats. I don't have a good word for beats because beats could also be like phases, but I don't mean phases. What I mean is that the intention of the cut changes. So just to stay on bow tie or on a SpongeBob, we have here's one. There's one decision, right?
Yeah.
Just getting to here. Here's two. Now I'm in this position.
Yeah.
And then here's three. Mm-hmm. And there's three, and there's three packets. So in my mind, this keeps a nice. And it's not XP equals XP isn't something that I decided like, oh, well, that's nice and balanced. Maybe I'll use that as a trend line and like think of those things, like try to keep that relevant. It was actually just sitting down and looking at the cuts that I like the most.
Yeah, and noticing that pattern.
And so like face, I do like this. Ooh. More or less, right? Mm-hmm. And if I count, I would say this. So I added that roll at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll call that's my one. So there's that decision one. Tobias did this. This is two.
Yep.
I'm gonna go through it again. Three. Mm-hmm. Now I'm gonna do closer four. And there's like a fifth. So there's a bit of leeway. This is just I use that as an example because SpongeBob ends on three, right? There's three distinct portions. You can also end on that next beat, and it still feel cohesive. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But the point being, any cut that I like, most of the time I just found at one point that the ones that I like the most of mine and of other people's fit that. And then I got to try to confirm that with Tobias and Oliver and those guys in 2015. I shared that idea with them, and they went through their cuts and found that was actually, even if it's not perfectly true, it's true enough. Yeah, it is a really good measure. It's true enough, which is what Franco said about it. Franco said, like, well, if it's not true, it's true enough, and I think that does that. Yeah, that gets you a fairly long way there. So that's what the XP equals XP thing.
Yeah, Yeah, that's really interesting. It's I'll have to think more about that myself in terms of the cuts. I was actually just playing around with some of the cuts here.
Well, you might. I bet you might find something like this thing. You do.
Oh yeah,
Where you use where you use that.
Yeah, it's like you have So I suppose that so depends if you count the opener as one, but there's definitely this, and the flipping,
Right.
and the closing.
Where
Um.
and what's the two-handed cut that you do?
Oh,
That
the
has that
two-handed cut. All right.
yeah, that runs like that.
I'll break it out because I'm nice. All right, I'll 1 sec. So, of course, when the camera's on.
That's why I refuse to apologize, because it's just part of it.
Yeah. So if we were to count.
So how many at its largest, how many packets are there?
So there's 4. There's always 4 packets.
Right on.
Actually, you know what? I'll do this. Yeah. So there's the opener, which I think counts as a moment, because it's kind of surprising. And then there's the opening here.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably another moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then
2.
Closing this. And that.
Yeah.
So I think it was 4. Yeah, I think that's.
And part of this too, like, is like people might argue, like, well, you could always just count how many.
Yeah,
but I mean, like, mechanics is really what I'm talking about. So even the closer, there's a moment where it closes.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not one. That's not what I'm talking about as being one. I'm talking about all this, like this whole sequence. That is one.
Oh yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Those things are there. So I think you would find that even if there's 1, 2,
there's
on 3.
bad here. Yeah, I kept.
And think about the sequences of like the actual design that you had in mind for. Yeah. So there's 1. Now we're at 2, because when that dumps, and then all that goes over 3. You did the same. You're working with 1 mechanic there.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
you have a theme there. You have 1 real clear idea that you were working with there, and you're doing it. You're doing it 4 times.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the point. The point is that it's, even if it's not true, it's true enough. There's something great about that cut. There's something really, really great about that cut. And there's things that are great about other cuts. One thing that seems to be really true is that the number of packets that you have at its largest tends to match. And now this does kind of make sense if you think of it in terms of you have to solve. So like if you go to the opener, you split something up, you immediately have to solve all of those.
Yes. Yeah.
All those things have to happen. You have to. So if you have 4 packets, it would.
Yep.
If each packet is going to look as though it was necessary, right? Which is the no base thing, like dropping the base.
Yep.
Right. If every packet is being, you'll end up with that kind of equation.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, and because like if you have bow tie, right? We'll see how I do it like this. That you can do. So originally it was this.
Mm.
Right? And then the whole thing. But if I counted it, I would go, so it's going to be, at its biggest, it's 5, right?
Yep.
Right here, so it's 5. So if I were to count, I would go, there's 1, because you have to set up, and then kind of, but if you do it right, it's not all that bad. 1, right? There's 2. And then, I keep on trying to go into something. I have a different sequence thing that I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's ending on the 4th beat,
right?
Or on the 4th sequence, or the 4th.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it. I don't have it, but on the 4th. But there's 5 packets, right? So if our equation xp equals xp is true, and they have to actually be the same number, then I have something wrong in this cut. Because I have 5 packets, but the 5th packet is dead. The 5th packet is just here.
Yeah.
It's not really a part of bow tie. It's not bow tying. This
Yeah.
packet never bow ties, right? Like it never does the thing. So is there, this is why I have confidence that this is a really useful thing, because I feel like this awareness of XP equals XP made bow tie better. Because now I do bow tie, and now I do bow tie like this, where I split here. I don't take one into the base, right? I don't take one into dealers. So I go 1, and I do 2. I drop this one into there. There's 2, and then I put it away.
Yep.
3, and then you're ending on 4, and so now I have purpose. So because it moves, because it goes somewhere and comes back somewhere, it's now a part of the whole thing, and you're still in that. So you can go 1. There's 2. Drop that 3, 4. Now you're on 5. So now you have a 5 packet cut that has 5 beats, and you can show why that's true. And I think it made bow tie better. I think it made it more interesting. So that's one reason to think maybe it's actually useful. And if it's not true, it's true enough.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And also, it's to come back to those questions. If you're asking a bunch of questions and you're looking at 2 options, and there's the more questions you ask, the more, first of all, more likely you'll get something that's good, because you're asking different questions about different things. But also, you can get to a situation where everything balances out, where you have like various options which are all equally good for different reasons. And it's just having an idea like, well, XP equals X beat is just another question that could just separate this into that. Because if this direction gives you opportunities to keep going, but you should really start thinking about closing, then while it's a good option, it's not the option that you want, given the fact
it's just a different cut.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wherever you would go, whatever you would continue to go into a sequence, it's still useful. You can still do that, but start there maybe, and then go on to a different. Which is true of a few cuts that I have, where there was one idea that was actually in between these 2 things that ended up being a springboard for a different cut.
Yep.
And so they're connected, but you would never think of them as being connected. But I could have continued in a different direction and made some long thing. I also think it keeps it nice and concise. I think it adds that satisfaction that you can get with a packet cut when it just ends, or like it's just what it needs to be. There's a real satisfaction. I think that satisfaction is intrinsic to something being true. And I think what's true is that the largest number of packets that you have should also equal the number of phases or beats or
units,
grip changes, or whatever, however this works best for you in there. And then you have, and then it's just a matter of, so my intuition when I first thought that, which I didn't just think, oh, you know what, XP equals XP, E equals MC squared. Oh, that sounds like, I didn't just come, I was actually just listing all the cuts that I liked. And then I drew each cut for like what the thumbnail would be. Yeah. Like I just drew little rectangles in like the general shapes that they were of like the moment of cut. And then I just listed stuff about it. And I got through like 6 of them, and I realized every single one of them, when I would list how many phases it had or how many beats it had, that number was the same as the number of packets that it had, which was another column of description that I had. So then I realized, okay, these things, this is a real balance that's worth striking. And so my goal became, that has to be true in all the cuts that I make. So SpongeBall was the first cut that I made that had to be true, because I had that in mind, and I knew that it was true about my other cuts, and that it had to be true about this one. Or if I made it true about this one, that it would qualify as potentially a good cut. So I had to follow that guideline. I'm trying to change now, because I'm trying to be more. I'm trying to be less predictable with the kinds of
Right.
cuts that I'll come up with, because I want to keep on growing and
Yeah,
moving in different directions.
definitely.
So watching Patrick incorporate that kind of thinking into his work is neat, but it's more interesting to me to kind of do a tap dance on top of that, to like intentionally mess that up, to not keep that symmetry, to add in an extra beat just because it's surprising.
Yes.
Because the end is surprising, or to start off some way just because it's where you go with it isn't predictable. But yeah, so even if it's not true, it's true enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the overall point. I think that's really the clearest way of explaining.
Yeah, and
how it's useful.
Yeah. So in terms of rules, do you have other ones that come to your mind right now?
Not that I've dived into that far.
Yeah, because this one is particularly defined.
Yeah, I mean that one's pretty. That's again just like the infinity thing, and just like the other things that we've talked about, like accepting these large things as being true, and being able, not only accepting them, but actually being able to sit with them, and use them in your intuition, and developing them as an intuition, is the most useful thing that I could think to describe. Like even Zach had a great point when he was at Cardistry Con. He was saying he really wanted to say something useful to people, and so he decided that he would share that. Find something that you like, and then list all the things that you like about it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is just a way of, that's just really practical advice. That's
just
definitely. Look at it, because usually the advice would be like, well, take what you like and use it for what you're doing. Where do I even start with that? What does that even mean? Well, real practical. List out the things that you, on a piece of paper, write down the things that you like about a thing, and then look at all of them, and then make a column of all your favorite things were like this, and then you just have to build this stuff into your intuition, and that's a difficult thing to do, but that's also the entire artistic
that's art in a nutshell.
I mean, we're talking very big here. That's all of this could be more or less applied to anything, to any art.
Yeah.
If what we're doing is art.
So actually about that, so for those who've been around for a while, there's a gentleman that goes by Adam who was on YouTube. He was Flourisher and some number, because that's what usernames were. But he used to make videos with Ryuji before he stopped Cardistry, and now he's studying music in college and whatnot. And one thing that he said to me that was really interesting is that he doesn't do it Cardistry anymore at all. But creating things in terms of Cardistry and all of that really helped him in terms of music, just because now he understands a lot more. Like, it was a shortcut for him, because now he understands the whole what creativity is, and coming up with stuff, and things like that. And so I think just with that alone, I think calling Cardistry an art is not that pretentious as it might sound and feel. I think there really is something to Cardistry that we could call artistic without
I mean, I would the way I've come to kind of accept it is, I mean, I don't find myself talking about Cardistry being an art to people. Like, it's not really a relevant question.
Yes, yeah.
Really, like, there's not like a topic that you'd be on that was like, well, let's figure out if Cardistry is an art, and then we can answer this question. It's not like a really all you could possibly say, because you can ask that about anything. You can ask, is anything art? Like, you have a lot of modern art is just two things put next to each other that don't seem to have a purpose next to it, and then suddenly it's art and everyone accepts it as being art. If like the through line is that people is whether the person who made it had the experience of an artist. It's really the only relevant question, because you can ask anything. Well, is anything art? Like painting, everyone says that's art. Cool, it's totally accepted. How is that not art? That's like the core one. Music, 100%. Of course, it's art. Skateboarding. Oh, that's different. That's a different thing. All kinds of different images popped in my head when I thought that, because sport is also a relevant adjective of what that is. It's like there's athleticism involved. So does that make it less artistic? Well, you have to answer that. But I would say that all I can say to answer is cardistry and art is, well, my experience up until this point has been what I would describe as an artistic art.
Yep.
My experience is of an artist, and no, I don't know if what I'm producing is art, but my experience is of an artist. Presumably, I've never been an artist with anything else, honestly, really. Like I used to draw and stuff like that, but they didn't have a trajectory of art with anything else other than cardistry. So my only reference point is for what it's like to be an artist is as what it's like to make card flourishes or packet cuts. I can tell, I'm having a lot of the same drawbacks and it's just in general the same experience of what other people describe when they say that they paint. It does seem very much so from my side to be art, but no, there's no way of answer. There's no way of infinity minus one is infinity, and that's just true, and that's just what it is. Art, you can't. There's not a column of things that are definitely art and a column of other things that definitely aren't. This is all just a wash, and we have culture, and culture, our culture is shaping to where music definitely, painting 100%, sketching totally an art. Those things are ingrained in there. So we have a ways to go if like you had to convince somebody, but most people would just accept it as being so.
Yeah, especially with things like modern arts, which are always controversial in terms of whether or not they're art.
Right. Yeah. It's just the wrong. It would be nice to answer that question, but there's not a answer to that, because it's not really a question.
It's also not a very useful question intrinsically, because sure, now that we've decided that it's art, what now? What does that change? Well,
right, because the only thing that you're trying to change is your experience of doing it. So if it doesn't do that, then you're not really making any progress. But it is a fun thing to
yes, at the very least.
But I've never come across anyone who said no to cardistry being an art.
That's true.
I don't think really anyone would really disagree, because everyone understands art to be a suitcase term of just all these things. Just like saying sports. It's like, is skateboarding a sport? Well, if you answer is baseball a sport, the only difference is there is a clear winner in baseball. Because they're using athleticism to achieve a goal. But then what happens when you have a skateboarding competition? Now there is a winner. So now are you saying that it's not? It's just a suitcase term. It's just a very broad thing to be saying.
I think the only thing that stops cardistry from being called an art is the idea of having an intrinsic meaning behind a quote art piece, because I think it's hard to argue that certain cuts are really hiding a meaning. But this is kind of what some of the source behind thinking of cuts as stories and where we can go with that. But that's not a completed sequence of thoughts yet, so I'm going to leave it at that. Yes. So to slightly track back again, I wanted to ask you something about. I'm being professional. I have a notepad with a bunch of questions, so I'm improving. Yes. So in the broad strokes of creative process, you talked about some of the rules that you have. Mostly, XP equals X beats. Do you have any pet peeves that you see in other people doing flourishes and that just irk you, and you're like, oh, that just made it bad?
Yeah, I mean, single cards are the one that, just because I'm used to not liking single cards,
Yeah.
but that's not the case. I think that was a choice that I made specifically because I wanted to make a certain type of cut that hadn't happened before.
Yep.
Like there are cuts that I could point to that clearly defined the margins that I wanted to stay inside of for creating card flourishes. And one of them was you can't split off one card, and it was just that one card just looked so flimsy and easy, and really it was just this thing, just everybody adding this.
Yeah.
Back in the days, everything had this. It was like, and this one, right? And it just becomes, when you have a single card, it becomes about that single card. So Tobias has a cut that broke all these rules for me. What is that cut called? He just posted it recently, where he loads a card to this.
Albatross.
That one is a single card, but what I didn't like about single cards was that it made the whole cut about that one card.
Yep.
And he used that. He made it about that. Yeah, it's about that one card starting here, transferring up here, coming back and sliding out and tumbling forward. And so they made it totally okay because it was right on point. It was so I guess that would be a pet peeve, but it's one that I'm letting go of. It's okay to me now because I don't have to worry about doing it because I have squids.
Yeah.
So if I decide to use cards and make something with cards, now I feel a little obligated to at some point use one card or to use a spread or something, I feel obligated to know how to do an arm spread catch.
Yep.
Because I'm working with a medium that's what it's for. And this is what I was saying earlier about all the moves that I ever made, I can do with squids. And that's because that's what my style of packet cutting is fighting against the nature of cards. So Aviv, totally embracing cards.
Oh yeah.
Totally embracing. Things need to spread and smear and bend and you need to throw. All that stuff is very card oriented. It's using the properties of cards. What I was trying to do was fight against the nature of cards. Just completely not let them do what they want to do. I'm going to keep you in a packet, and you're going to stay square, and I'm going to pass it around, and that was the whole point. So now that whole style has been crystallized into squids to where that's what it produces. Squids produce cuts that look like what I was trying to do because they can't do anything else. They can't go anywhere else. And so now I have two brushes. Now I have cards, and cards are now opened to me as being only useful if you're using them for what they can do, not to fight against it. And that's just an extra step that you don't have to go through.
Right. Any other pet peeves that come to mind?
I bet there's a million. I bet Patrick could name a bunch for me of what things that I would be annoyed by, but not really. Not at the moment. Not at the moment.
Okay.
I'm not seeing stuff in my Instagram feed that I hate or anything.
Okay.
I guess maybe this like ending with a peace sign or anything. I don't want to see that part. I think I get it. I know it's funny. I see the cuteness. I see the playfulness, but no, that is not the aim. I'm never going to have that aim to like end in a thing like that.
Yeah, I my experience with that specifically was that when doing I have to do it right. When I'm doing this cut, I realized that this fell deep into the peace out.
And there's that joke. But if I'm having to find pet peeves, I guess maybe seeing that, if I had to see that at the end of every video, I wouldn't like it. So maybe that's a pet peeve. But no, I'm genuinely trying to actively fight against having those pet peeves, because up until this point, that's all that I've done. Up until this point, it's just been really, really strict on what counts as a cut, what counts as good, what needs to be true about this thing. And those things like you get Saxon and Slick Rock and Nimbus and Bowtie and the ones that I haven't named. Although you get those if you stay strict to this one thing. And now, since I'm not in a place where my aim every morning isn't to make a cut anymore. Now my aim is to get as much coffee in me because I need to pour the next squids, and I need to go get a different colored paint, and those are the problems that I'm solving day to day right now. So I'm not making progress making cuts. So I'm trying to make progress by incorporating more into what I find acceptable.
Right.
And recognizing that the really strict rules that I have for myself for what I will post. And there's things that I've posted that aren't things that are like, oh, it was just necessary for me to post because I'm trying to have a company and I really need to post today because I need people to be aware of something. And then so I just force something out and it's not green, and I have to put that stuff out. But the things that I really hold close to me, the ones that I really, really am proud of, were all really strictly made. And since I don't have a lot of time currently at the moment to keep diving into that, I'm trying to accept more and literally just be more like Patrick. I'm trying to I'm trying to accept more things onto my canvas. I'm trying to be more okay with me coming and producing stuff that's not along this guideline. I wouldn't produce something if it wasn't along the guidelines that I wanted. Patrick's mindset, and Patrick I keep saying Patrick because he's the one that's really crystallized this for me. Patrick's style is based on whatever comes out of him. He's finding out what his style is as he's going. I decided what mine was, and then I stayed to it. Right. And that was just strategic at the time because I knew that this was a style that people weren't doing, and it was a style that wasn't obvious. And so I thought, I'll claim this one, and I'll stick to this really hard, and maybe people appreciate it. And then I had Nimbus done and completed for maybe a year, and maybe just a bit over a year before NB3 happened. Like done, like it had been finished, and now I had it down, and I could do it well for maybe a year before NB3. And before NB3, I hadn't done anything. Like I hadn't put anything online. I hadn't talked to magicians about me doing cardistry. It was just a silent. It was a sneak attack. I was trying to keep the stuff to myself to so that I could kind of display an entirely new spectrum,
right?
A new approach, and be able to claim it as mine. But because my goal actually was to make, because I was doing magic consulting at the time, so I was helping people make magic tricks and stuff, and that's how I was making it through life. And so cards were always there, so I was using cards a lot, and I was really proficient with card magic and sleights, and I was really comfortable with the deck of cards. So when it came to, okay, now cardistry is gonna be, I'm gonna try to do this cardistry thing, I had a lot of source material to where I got to weed out through a whole lot of stuff before I even started. And so I picked the style that I wanted, which was a style that hadn't been before. And I just paid attention to that. And now that whole trajectory, all that turned into Squids, turned into, oh, okay, there is something here. There is something really useful here. And now that I have that, and my every day is about making them, I'm trying to imagine how I could use these without being so, I guess at the end, uptight about what counts.
Right.
And Patrick's been a huge help in articulating the value that's inside of finding your style through seeing what comes out of you, not by deciding, okay, I know this good, so I'm going to do that. You need that. So I'm trying to incorporate that, and I think I'm getting better for it, especially because it's the way of making what feels like genuine progress while not actually being able to create. Now. And I do get to create. There are stuff I do get to. It's wonderful. Every single problem that I have in my life is a cardistry problem. Like it's related to cardistry. So like, it's absolutely wonderful. Being able to take that approach. So hopefully that will bear out in another while, to where that will be clear people. Yeah, that's the case.
Yeah. Cool. I forget where we were before this, but
something about solving the entire world or something.
Yeah, one of those. That sounds about right.
I think we were gonna. Well, here I'll tell you this. This is something that you wrote down questions. I wrote down a couple of things that I wanted to be sure to say, and the only thing that I really wanted to be sure to say was something that I didn't say at Cardistry Con.
Yeah.
Which was to give this example to explain Squids. Imagine a toy that it's a ball and a cup. Okay, so the whole point of this game is to throw the ball up in the air and catch it on the top of this cup, right? So I just got a cup here, and I'm just gonna catch it on top of that cup. And just for argument's sake, let's say there's 4 cups, like two on the side, one on the top, and one on the bottom. All right, and I have this ball, and I can catch it on top of this cup, and I can toss it and catch it on this cup, throw it up and throw the handle up and catch the handle in the other hand, and then catch it on this cup. Right? Yep. This is kendama. Right? Yes. That's what kendama. So imagine a world where that was kendama, and you can imagine that being a game, because that would be a really hard game to toss this ball up and catch it on these different sides of the cup, and coming up with sequences that involve all of them and all that kind of stuff. Imagine that takes off and people are doing that. That's easy to imagine. Think about what it would be like for somebody to enter that space and say, I'm going to put a string on it. Most people would say, well, now there's not a game because the ball can't roll away from you. There's no risk, right?
Yeah.
The cards, well, no, you can't. Well, yeah, the whole part is that you don't drop the cards. Like now there's no risk involved. Now you're changing the game. And then, I mean, it's a simple step. Imagine someone making the argument for no, you want the string to be on there because you don't have to pick up the ball. It's not going to roll away.
Mm-hmm.
And even better, now you can incorporate the string. So now you get this spinny stuff where it wraps around your finger and you kick it in all different directions and stuff. So my point is, that is what squids are doing to cardistry. They are. It's like putting a string on a kendama. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is technically less difficult because it's less risky. Because you can try more times.
Yep.
Literally because you just have more times to try to catch it on the cup to get that down proficiently. And imagine being really good at it without the string, and then adding the string, the amount of stuff that you'd be able to try, and the different things that would come up given the information of, well, the string's not at all points necessary, but you can bring it into play.
Yeah.
That's all that squids are doing. They're just adding the string to a kendama. It's just making the game a better game. It's just a better game.
Right.
Now, because you have more things to work with. There's less running after this ball that keeps falling and breaking because you're trying to throw it up high to do something cool and it keeps. All those things are fixed. So like if having a string on a kendama does not make kendama any less of what it is, then squids certainly aren't messing anything up. It's just accepting it. Sure, there's another thing with kendamas where traditionally, so you have the top I don't know what to call it, the top hold, I don't know, whatever.
I don't know, I'm
cup,
not.
The top cup. The string is tied just to the side of one of them. So the string isn't perfectly aligned with the center of the cup. It's actually slightly to the side. So you have to correct for that because kendama, you're trying to aim for this little hole to stab it in. So you have to be aware that that's where it is. Recently, within the last couple of years, people decided, well, I'm going to drill the hole in the middle. And people had a problem with that. Some amount of people were like, you're changing it. Because now it's easy. Because now it's easier. Because the center of that ball is always tumbling, or more often tumbling in a way that's in a good relation to the spike or to the top cup or whatever.
Yep.
Or I guess it doesn't have a cup on top; it's just on the sides. But the point being, this is perfectly acceptable, and people fall into the caveat of like as if something's being taken away from them. And all I can encourage you is that no, it's not. It's quite the opposite. You are opening up room for growth. Now there's I guess it's less risky, but why are you so? Go do something else if you need to be risky. This isn't the space for risky. This is the space for relationships to be explored and all those kinds of things. So,
right.
I think that drives the point home for some people too.
Yeah. And I've been looking at chat, and it seems like a lot of people that rings with a lot of people, and it makes a lot more sense to have such a. It's the idea of adding a string, I think is a lot more explicit.
Because imagine you started pretend like you started. So I'm just saying, don't think of squids as being maybe it's not a new develop. Don't like if you can imagine kendama being played without the string.
Yeah.
And accept that, then you can accept playing cards. Because there's no safety net. There's no.
Yep.
But it's also less to work with. It's also like, the game is really, really hard when you're using cards, especially for making packet cards. Like for me, now that I have squids, literally, when I first made this, like when I first understood what the shape needed to be, and I first started to try to achieve that shape, and it started working, I was like, oh, I'm finally going to be able to start packet cutting. Like I'm finally going to be able to do it. Like I have something that's going to let me do it.
Right.
And now I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because I'm also choosing this time to change what I think really matters. So, but that's just because that's the only way I can make progress right now is to try to accept different things. So that when I come out the other side of this whole squid madness and maybe one day be able to have a full day of doing cardistry or something again. And I do get days of cardistry, but it's because I'm building them into my schedule.
Yes, I have plugged in hours for cardistry.
Yeah, because you have school and stuff, and you gotta choose your times wisely. Yeah, I think I love that example of the kendama string because it's easier to accept. You see why it's silly. You see how, frankly, how stupid it is, and how unuseful it is to say, yeah, but the ball doesn't roll away, or well, now it's easier. Well, I guess you're right. Like, okay.
I mean, cool. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. It seems like this should be written up somewhere. I don't know.
That whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful way of looking at it.
Maybe that'd be a good Reddit. I never get on Reddit usually.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I always stay away from Reddit. It's too emotional. Too emotional in Reddit. Everybody either aiming to be confrontational or just ask. Literally, it seems like Reddit is filled with people trying to ask questions genuinely and people trying to. I mean, it does. I don't think their aim is to not give good answers, but there's too much hate. It's just like, I don't want to read through all that. Yeah, but maybe we'll do a post like that because I think that is. Oh, or here is the perfect forum for it now for those kinds of things to be shared.
Yeah, no, I mean the cardistry subreddit as subreddits go is pretty good, partially because there's not that many people on it, so there's only a certain proportion of people that are
right. So that might be a better way of saying what I'm saying, because I'm jumping into this moving stream of conversation that is really only revolving around less than 30 people, and like that really consistently always post and you recognize their names and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jumping into that stream, so it's a bit with a little bit of whiplash maybe happens when I do that.
Yeah.
I like people talking about cardistry, so
I think it's a decent medium for that. When important topics do pop up, there is some meaningful discussions. Right now, it's a lot of beginners right now who are asking simple questions that they have already been asked.
So that's where you think to go. That's my only. I mean, I'm saying all this having not gotten on Reddit for months, so so maybe none of this is actually true, and my impression was just of a short window of time. But
anyways, there's a few other things I wanted to address. One of them is naming cuts. What is your naming process? Or
I mean, well, my relationship to naming cuts is started off with I never considered naming it. Like I didn't think of them as having names, because I don't think at the time, well, the only people who named stuff were people who could sell their food. So and a number, some other people, but they named it because you had to have a name, because you had to know which flourish you were clicking on the tutorial for. Like you had to call it something. I never really thought of it. Like Bowtie, Andres Jake named Bowtie. I didn't know. We were filming NB3 and he asked me what this one was called. I was like, oh, I don't have a name. So he came up with Bowtie, and I thought that was really good. Because it does kind of look like a bow tie. You get these four angles going off.
I agree.
From the center, and Nimbus was Nimbus was different though. Nimbus I did choose because I thought it was like a part of my focus for Nimbus was having this little orbital thing. I wanted it to just be after I didn't start off with this intention, but after I started working with Nimbus, what ended up being Nimbus, I was like, oh, it's like just a little ball, it's like a little fluffy cloud in your hands. You know, it's just like it's tumbling around. So I was like, okay, Nimbus is that Goku's or whoever's cloud thing or whatever. And then Saxon is the name of a road in New Smyrna Beach.
Yep.
That I take to go off onto a trail that I used to walk all the time. Slick Rock is the name of, there's a Slick Rock Trail in Arizona. Where is that? No, is it in Arizona? Yeah, in Arizona, that I went to one time traveling. Right when I first started Ready Set Cards, was now Pocket Park on Instagram, but it started as Ready Set Cards. And the very first thing we did was, I think I had like a week of posting, and then I went on a trip and I traveled from Idaho back to Florida, and we passed a place called Slick Rock, and we get to skate down these bike trails, just miles of smooth rock. So I mean, naming them to me is, I only name them when I have to. Like, I don't have a name for this thing, for that thing. I've never named that. I have no idea how to start to name something like that, and I probably won't put any effort into naming it until I have to make a tutorial.
Yeah.
And then maybe, because that's the only reason I named, because there's not a tutorial for Saxon, but the reason I had to name it Saxon was because I was trying to do a Kickstarter, and part of the Kickstarter was going to be tutorials, and so I had to name it. So I took that road because I was on that road all the time, and I thought it was a nice word or whatever. Patrick, bring up Patrick again. Patrick loves naming. Loves naming flourishes. And he's good at it too. He does kind of gist of like what's going on and finds a word that can fit there. That is a fun game. I find that to be a completely separate game.
Oh yeah.
My actual and artistic or whatever. It's not. No. My answer is no. It's not super important. Obviously, it's not super important, but it is neat, yes, to come up with aesthetically pleasing words that maybe describe part of what happens. Like Dropbox is great. Dropbox is a great name.
Dropbox.
I have this one. This was called. I called this Mailbox. And again, I had to name it because the Kickstarter, and I was going to do tutorials, and so I had to name it. And I just thought, you have this thing.
Oh yeah.
It's like a mailbox, so I'll call it Mailbox.
Yep.
And people will ask, why is it called Mailbox? Why is it Squids?
Yeah. All right, interesting. Yeah, because I've started asking that question ever since Patrick's stream, because he had a whole bunch of stuff to say about that.
Oh, yeah, I bet it is.
I find it's an interesting part, because it also says something about how it can say something about how you're making cuts, because if you're making cuts in terms of having a name for them that is meaningful and aesthetic, then that can change your how you're making cuts.
That might be another good pet peeve of mine, is to when people name flourishes because it's a nice word, because it's like an uncommon word or a slightly French sounding word or those kinds of things. Like, I get that is a bit of a pet peeve.
Yep, I just did
people but it's just because people are just like, you don't need to do that. I don't know. I mean, it's all.
Yeah.
It's literally my point is literally it's whatever you want.
Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah. And for a long time I didn't. Literally, and I was intentional about it early on, where I didn't name flourishes. So people, when I'd post something on Instagram early on, people wouldn't have a name, so they'd have to ask it by articulating what happens in the cut.
Yeah.
And I was always really proud that people could.
Yes.
That you'd use different words to describe Nimbus than you would
Yep.
bow tie. Like you do the one where it passes like this, the one that you're like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's great. They're recognizing as this as being different from this.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah, that relates to I think what Antoine was saying at Cardistry about, measuring cuts by how quickly you can describe them. And
yeah, 100%. Yeah, you should there should and that leans to what Patrick, what you're saying about him talking about purpose or the why.
Yeah.
He's naming, when Patrick names a flourish, he names the why. He sees the thing that's in there and he uses that as the name for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what more or less everybody does. But it's a game. Naming flourishes is a game that I'm not super enthralled by.
Yeah.
I would just as quickly just accept whatever everybody's calling it.
Yeah, I've noticed this it becoming more and more difficult as cuts become more and more complicated. So my claim to fame in terms of naming cuts is something Sisyphus, which is this one, and it has a story behind why it's named.
Oh, because the Sisyphus is like the ball, the rock rolling down the. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason it's not just called Sisyphus and called something Sisyphus is because I was brainstorming some of these names and I thought the first thing that came to my mind, because I'm a nerd, is Sisyphus. I was like, well, Sisyphus itself is kind of dry, and so I for a split second I considered something really stupid like Sisyphus's despair or something really really pretentious like that, and I thought about that for a split second, and the next split second I was like, wow, that's the stupidest thing I've ever thought of. And to make fun of myself, I called it something Sisyphus.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually really good. So I wish that Cardistry was built more on. We pass stuff like you'll notice something that somebody does and you'll take that and incorporate it in something that you do and you use it as inspiration or whatever. Cardistry, or rather skateboarding, the name of the trick actually tells you what the goal is, right? So like you could say, simple, just a double kickflip. Well, I know what a kickflip is. I'm going to do two of them. Yep. It's going to be double. And it actually describes what's happening. We don't have that in Cardistry.
Yeah.
Like you could say, like Billy put up, I forget what he called it. He's going to be mad at me for not knowing. It was an interlocked Nimbus. But he gave a different name for. But I wish there was more opportunities for us to name stuff linked back to something else so that it has relevance at all, in the names, because you just come up with another nice word, but I wish it was like 360 flip and then a heart and all that. I wish adding in fakie and adding in switch and all those things. I wish we could do that with Cardistry for the names, like in terms of talking about names. I wish that's how the names. If I could have a system for naming flourishes, if I were to care about the names of flourishes, I would only care if there was actually relevant information in the name that's worth giving. I wish we were doing that, but our community or our art form is not beholden to what's happened in the past. We're not quite, but we are building on each other. We are stealing grips from each other, and we are doing those things, but not by name.
And also I don't think it works as well because of the complexity and all of the difference, the variety and complexity that you can achieve. I don't think our language really spans enough that space without going into exceedingly long names and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a slightly. It's necessary if you're going to make a tutorial. but if you're not going to make a tutorial,
Yep.
I don't know why you see need to name it other than to give people a word to use to reference what you did.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So let me look at this fancy old.
I should be looking at the chat as well.
Yeah, chat has been doing their own thing, and they've been a bit more quiet recently. So someone noted that I changed my YouTube channel name from, well, now it's just my name, Matt Beaudouin, but it used to be Magician because I used to be 13-year-old. So yeah, one person did bring up ICO, and I think that'd be interesting thing to talk about. So yeah, what's the what are your thoughts on ICO things at the moment?
I haven't watched enough videos to have an opinion on any one person that I'm excited about or anything.
Yeah.
I could go off on what structure we actually need for competitions. Just recently with Street League, skateboarding, really just recently, street skateboarding, which has been the predominant style for a long time, can actually be judged in a way that people can more or less agree on. And that's new, that people are just now finding that. I don't think we have found the right format for a competition for cardistry. Right now, it's just a way of generating a lot of content and giving people, you predictably knowing it, you know a video's coming, and that's fun. But I don't think that we found the right one yet, or I'll rephrase. I think no one has executed the right one yet. I think we have an idea of what the right format would be. But there's nothing against I mean, I'm excited that people are sharing and trying hard and doing all those things. So
yeah,
there's nothing to hate on, really.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And it's exciting. It is neat. I wish I'd seen more. I wish I could.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to
tell you who I was excited about because there's so many. It's hard to.
Yeah,
it's hard
it's
to do all
too
of
much
them
volume.
anyways.
Yeah,
and maybe that's maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that's something we should fix.
Yeah, just perhaps. I wonder if anyone will pick up on anything. So yeah, my experience has been the same. There's been a lot. I've only been looking at the entries that people post on the Reddits because I don't have the time to actually sift through
and just
a whole bunch. Whereas just people will self-filter and just post their own stuff on Reddit, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not as good, and yeah. So again, yeah, I haven't noticed anyone in particular that'll pop out. I'm looking forward to some of the rounds to go through, so I can look at who's been narrowed down to, and also look at their older videos.
Right. The Cardistry Con competition was fun to be a part of. I got to be a judge for that.
Right. Yeah.
I ended up finding it really, really difficult to write down and actually articulate critiques.
Yeah.
So my critiques ended up being really void of any real comment. I encouraged the people that I thought was doing good, and I tried to give light to people who I thought could be doing better. But I found it really, really difficult to do. You have Kevin loves doing that. That's the perfect thing for Kevin, is to break down a video. Because the Verts, their product is a video. That's what the Verts are good at doing. They're really good at making videos. And so that was a perfect chance for them to dive in and find the things that were wrong with videos. For me, it was hard for me because I did not care. I can't explain how much I did not care at all, and still don't care at all about the quality of the video. I just didn't want to be fooled by the quality of the video, because I wanted the winner to genuinely be the better cardist. And sometimes videos fake that.
Yeah.
And so I think we didn't weed out the right people at every step, particularly in the first round. But that's just difficult. That just comes back to we do need to find a better format for cardistry. So it's not us just critiquing, because it was just us critiquing people's videos. And since I didn't care at all, I intentionally didn't comment on the quality of the video or the quality of the framing of the shots, or like I ended up saying some stuff about maybe go, don't do it in your room, but your room's totally fine. All I need to be able to do is see the cut. But I found it really difficult to critique just those things and find enough to say. So I more or less ended up saying nothing and putting this stuff up really quick. But I learned a lot from doing that, and I really liked watching the competition. And it's amazing to watch people force material out of themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's cool, because I've only made like 8 cuts. Like really, in my mind, I've only done a few. So like the idea of doing 4 2-minute videos, like, oh yeah, I can't, like, flourish it only lasts 10 seconds. How am I gonna film a minute? You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found those critiques hard to do, and that's part of when I started thinking, like, there's got to be a better competition structure than what we've done in the past.
Yep. Yeah, I think I agree. And
there's competitions happening in South America, and stuff, and that's crazy cool, because their community is really strong. And oh man, I really think cardistry is, like, I think we doubled. My intuition is that we doubled in size from 2015 to 2016.
Looking, actually, I'd like to look at this.
I bet that happens again.
Yeah, I get that sense from the Cardistry subreddit alone, because I got into that pretty much right after CardistryCon last year, and well, there was that moment where I had a post on Reddit that went pretty wild, as it can do. But as a result of that, there was a spike in people subscribing to the Cardistry subreddit. I'm trying to find if there's a button that gives us stats, but I don't see it. But I remember there's a very distinct plot of number of people subscribed, and it definitely increased.
It's cool. It's crazy, man. It's wonderful, because there's another isolation or another card destroy or another packet cut thing to be found. I mean, almost necessarily there's way more. So I'm stoked to see what other thing has been thrown into the mix in another year or so.
Yeah,
it is fun to watch, and I'm so pleased, so stoked to know that I will be able to pay attention to that coming, now that Squids are doing, like, it's been such a blessing, man. Having it really is, like, I did a Kickstarter. I tried to do a Kickstarter for a deck of cards. And I tried to do a Kickstarter for a deck of cards that no one had seen before. And I tried doing a Kickstarter without telling anyone that a Kickstarter was coming. I literally just got fed up with the fact that I hadn't done it yet. And I had Squids in my mind. And I thought, well, let me try to exploit the card thing. Let me try to do a Kickstarter for cards. And then if that works, I can use the funds from that to start doing Squids. And that didn't happen because I didn't do the things that you need to do to have a successful Kickstarter.
Right. Yeah.
But it was really beneficial because it got that project out of the way and just like, okay, you gotta figure something else out. And so then when I started doing squids, I did it properly. I did what I was supposed to do. I posted with them for 2 weeks, didn't answer any questions about if anyone would be able to buy them. I tried to get as many people asking as possible and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I put up on Etsy a store for 100 individual squids. And I did 100 because if I sold 100 of them for the price that I was asking for each one, that was going to be enough money for me to make it to the end of that month without having to work at the coffee shop that I was working in, which was owned, which that coffee shop is owned by a good friend of mine who now owns half of Pocket Park.
Right.
I was able to control my hours because of my relationship with him. So I put up 100 because that's how much I needed. Because I knew if I sold all of them, then I could make it the rest of the month without having to work at the coffee shop, and I could just focus on making squids.
Yep.
And they sold out in the first day. It was 3 hours, and I sold 100 of them, and that was such a breakthrough moment. That was such a crazy, wonderful event. So then I was faced with, well, how do you make 100 squids? Like I have no idea how to make 100 squids, and let alone I have to do it in the next 2 weeks, because if I don't do it in the next 2 weeks, I don't have enough money to make it through, because I need to put more up. I need to sell more of them, so I have to finish these, and I have to finish these before I can put more up. So I did 100. Got through that. Somehow with rigging together molds, and had no idea, didn't know anything about plastic or any of the materials that I now use.
Yep.
And I squeezed those 100 out, and then put up 200, and those sold in like a day and a half or something, or 2 days or something. I was like, oh yeah, how do I make 200 squids? Because scaling is such a, and we were talking before about manufacturing cards and how impressed I am with that now. Scaling is really difficult, because it's easy if you have a target of how many you need to make. But I was in the position of like, I was making a mold for each squid when I started. So I made 100 of them, which means I made 100 molds for 100 squids.
Right.
And then I got to do 200. I was like, well, I can't. And again, I only have 2 weeks to do it, right? Because everything takes longer. So it didn't take those 2 weeks. It took 2.5 weeks. But I can't put up more squids. Now I need to show something different. I need to show a new graphic or something, have reason to do more. So I have to take these 3 days, blah, blah, blah. So now you're 1 week into the next month. Okay, I got to make 200 in the same amount of time. And I didn't do it before. I didn't quite do it in the time that I wanted to. How am I going to? So in all that time, I didn't work any hours at the coffee shop. And I just made squids. And then that has continued every single month. And I got to like 2 months in, and then moved to Portland for really no great reason, other than my lease was ending, and my friend who owned that coffee shop and now owns half of Pocket Park, he was out here, and he was going to be a big help continuing to make progress and stuff. And so I came out here assuming that I would be able to sell more that next month. I had no real good reason to think I could sell more, because there's no reference point. There's no, so I moved out here, which is scary, because I was just leaving a very, not a great job. It's just a coffee shop, but it was great because I was where I wanted to be. I was at the beach in Florida, and I could control my hours, and lots of great friends and stuff. So I didn't have a great reason to do it, but I did it, and it's worked every month since then. I've sold just enough every month to just barely make it through so my problems haven't changed. It's still trying to scale up and do all those things. But now we're close to a year in, really like 9 months of really making squids how I am now. And like I was saying, every single problem that I have is a problem related to cardistry. So there's literally no room to complain or even about like hours of like, it's as difficult as everyone told me it was going to be. Like I'd always heard having a company, trying to start a company was really hard. And it totally, all those things are totally true. Because it's a lot of stress, and there's a cliff at the end of every month, right? Because if I don't achieve the goal that I set for myself that month, I can't stay in this apartment. I'd have to go get another job doing something. And but if I get another job doing something, I necessarily won't have the time to make the progress that I'm making. So like these margins are so small, and it's just crept by every time. And so like seeing people actually enjoy squids and it taking on the shape that I really wanted it to take on, and it really selling the fun factor of cardistry and all this. It's too good. It's too good. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yes,
but it's also like eating glass and staring off the edge of a cliff,
Yeah, it's the way you talk about cardistry problems makes me think that it's the kind of problems it's a good kind of problem to have.
That's right, yeah.
Not to understate.
Well, it's not a good problem. It's not a good problem to have, because problems aren't good to have, but it is a acceptable
as problems go.
Problem to have. As far as problems go, I mean, it's literally perfect. This morning, I had to be able to get here on time. I had to get up a couple of hours earlier than I would have to pour some squids, and I had to go get a couple of stuff to make that happen. And they're doing something right now, and when we get off, I'll have a next step to go do, and then hopefully by 10:30 tonight I will have finished what I need to finish, so that in the morning I can wake up and do it again, and get all these Pop-Tarts shipped out. So it's great, because now we're just now, this is kind of a point of, this may not be interesting to anyone, but we just now, for the first time, we're able to actually get squids made before they were bought.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're just now kind of getting to the other side of doing this, where there's actually a stock of squids,
right,
that we are selling. So we did those Pop-Tarts, left Pop-Tarts up. So we sold very adequate amount, very encouraged by the support. And so now we got the first half shipped off, and now I'm taking this weekend and then Monday to finish them. Then we'll be in a position where now we can do different squids. And then it's just moving forward. It's hard, because I wish they could all just be available all at once. I wish there was black and red and blue squids all on the site, and you could just grab one if you wanted, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. It's just not possible yet. If we made squids $150 each, maybe we can squeeze out. But it's trying to find that line of the amount of value that I think squids actually have, and the amount of value that our community perceives them to have, and a value that parents will say yes to, and an amount that I can actually work with, and I can actually do the things that we necessarily have to do to get all this stuff done. So that's been wonderful. I don't leave my apartment very often, and I don't have any new friends in Portland. I don't go out. I don't, because I can't. I mean, and that's fine. That's totally fine. I mean, that's just what is required of me right now. And I'm not finding it too difficult to stay focused. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're
Keep
in a
buying
pretty good
squids.
place.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really great.
Cool. All right. Well, this sounds like almost a pretty good place to stop.
Yeah, did we make it 5 hours? What's the
We're
record?
not quite at 5 hours yet. We're a bit more than 3 hours.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
It's all right.
So here, since it's been here, I'll show you. I want to see a new cut.
Oh hell yeah!
I got to do it a couple of times. I won't miss it. I was saying before,
Okay.
I don't like apologizing for not doing something. It's not part of it. Let me try to.
All right.
Now that it's like 3 hours in, because now it's really worth it if anybody made it this long.
Yeah. This is a treat for all the people who stuck around.
Do you want the name? I do have a name for this one. Do you want the name first, or do you want the name after?
Tell me the name after you perform it. How about that? Yep.
I'm trying to do it slow to make sure. Let's do it.
That's awesome.
So, wait, and actually, this is worth mentioning because Patrick named it 360 Charleston.
Right.
Because Tobias had his thing that used that optical illusion.
Yeah.
But that's a fun one because that one actually names more or less how I actually want to name stuff, which is
right.
It's relevant to something else and it actually gives you context to what it is.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love that. It looks like it.
Yeah, it looks really fun.
I absolutely loved this. The fact that you could this whole thing, which is what
that mechanic. Yep.
Tobias did. He had a fifth packet somewhere in there, but his principle was going like this.
Yeah, which
I think, and like grabbing those two or something, like doing all that. I just like that crossing thing, and then I found that opener, and then I realized I could be spinning this as we did it.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, and also the closer works nicely.
Yeah, and it's just like right there.
It's just a good cut. What can I say?
You could keep talking. Actually, keep on talking about how.
Yeah, actually, a funny thing. I was talking about Adam earlier, who's one of those people, and he's stopped doing cardistry, but every once in a while he picks up a deck of cards, and I distinctly remember him showing me what's called Charleston now. Definitely before seeing whatever video that's in.
Tobias, I think. The wheels within wheels, I think.
Wheels within wheels. Yeah, I remember him showing that out. So I don't know. I find that pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool principle.
Yeah,
that's a neat thing.
Yep.
Yeah, man. But thank you for doing all these interviews. Have been fun to watch. I did watch most of Patrick's. I get enough Patrick, so I didn't watch the whole thing. But the other ones that you're doing is cool because actually these kinds of conversations are what are going to become extremely necessary for us to grow into this, because otherwise we're just going to keep on spinning our wheels and as a community maybe keep growing in numbers, but we're not going to move forward. And if we can have as many people focused on not trying to keep stuff to themselves and not trying to make their value based on their scarcity, and instead people start making their value on their contribution, their words and their thoughts and whatever being articulated and become useful to actual people, I think I find that to be extremely necessary in a huge void that we have right now. So I think what you're doing is great.
I had the feeling that there was a lot of thoughts that were up in the air, and the closest thing I saw to something concrete was Who Shuffles Like That with I specifically think of Elliot's article on design and cardistry, and I was thinking there should be something.
We should a place for people to actually say these things.
Yeah,
I agree, and it's something like Best Card or Who Shuffles Like That. It's so hard to maintain that.
Oh yeah.
So ask somebody to write something and then it actually get done and edit it and
Yep.
put it up or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think this is a better medium for stuff like that.
Yeah, it's also feasible within my schedule, which is
between classes. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Right on.
cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for
Good
coming.
talking, man. Of
Yeah.
course.
And chat. See y'all in 2 weeks, probably,
Goodbye,
maybe, hopefully.
friends.
All right.